Evelyn Whitmore cocked the shotgun and pressed the cold barrel against the bleeding man's chest. "Give me one reason," she said, "before I lay you in the dirt next to my husband." The stranger didn't beg. He didn't raise his hands. He only breathed out, "Because the men hunting me will do far worse to you than I ever could." Her fingers shook on the trigger. She'd sworn no man would ever cross her gate again. If this story moves you, subscribe and follow it to the very end, and tell me in the comments which city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story travels. The shotgun didn't waver, but Evelyn's heart did. She stood on the porch with both barrels leveled at the stranger's chest, and the man just looked up at her from where he'd slid off his horse, one hand clamped over his side blood, black between his fingers in the failing light. He wasn't reaching for the pistol on his hip. That was the first thing she noticed. A dangerous man, a desperate man, always went for the iron. This one hadn't. "You've got till 3, Evelyn said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. 1, ma'am. 2, I'm not gonna hurt you." He coughed, and something wet rattled loose in it. "I couldn't if I wanted to. I can barely sit up." "Then you shouldn't have ridden onto my land." Her thumb rested against the hammer. "This is the part where you tell me who you are and why I shouldn't finish what somebody already started on you." The man closed his eyes for a moment, like the question cost him something. When he opened them again, they were clearer than she expected. "Name's Nathan Cole, and I'm not asking for your help. I'm not asking for food. I'm asking for one night in your barn, that's all. Come sunup, you'll never see me again." Men have said that to me before. I reckon they have. They lied. I'm not those men. Evelyn had heard that too, and from prettier mouths than his. But there was something in the way he said it tired and flat. No charm behind it that made her keep listening instead of pulling the trigger. She'd learned to read men the way she read weather. This one wasn't building toward anything. He was just running out. "Where's the gun trouble?" she asked. "Somebody shoot you, or did you shoot yourself doing something foolish?" "Somebody shot me." A grim ghost of a smile. "I'd have preferred foolish." "Who?" "That's a long story, ma'am, and I don't figure I've got the blood left to tell it standing up." He shifted his weight and hissed through his teeth. "Your barn. One night. I'll pay you if you want. I've got a little money." "I don't want your money." "Then I've got nothing to offer you but my word that I'll be gone before you wake." Evelyn should have said no. Every hard lesson the frontier had beaten into her said no. A woman alone did not take in a bleeding stranger with a pistol on his hip and a haunted look in his eye. A woman alone bolted her door and let the night handle its own business. She'd buried a husband. She'd buried the soft parts of herself right alongside him. She knew better. But then his horse, a big roan gone gray around the muzzle, nosed at the water trough by the gate, and Nathan Cole, half dead and bleeding into the dirt of her yard, lifted his good arm and gently pulled the animal's head away. "Not yet, girl," he murmured to the horse. "You'll founder yourself. Slow now, slow." He was dying, and he was worried about his horse drinking too fast. Evelyn had known cruel men who kept beautiful animals and beat them behind the barn. She'd known kind-looking men whose kindness ran exactly as deep as their own comfort. And she'd learned, God help her, that the truest thing you could know about a man was how he treated a creature that couldn't do a single thing for him in return. She lowered the shotgun. "Just an inch. You touch me," she said. "You so much as look at me sideways in the night, and I'll bury you where the coyotes'll find you before the marshal does. You understand me?" "Yes, ma'am." "Say it plain." "I understand." His head sagged. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. I haven't decided you're going to live yet." She came down the porch steps, keeping the barrel pointed at the ground now, but her finger still inside the guard. "Can you walk?" "I can try." Trying's not walking. He got one boot under himself and pushed. For a second, he was almost upright swaying, and then his knees folded like wet paper, and he went down hard into the dirt beside his horse. And this time, he didn't get up. The roan snorted and stamped and stood over him, and Evelyn stood there a long moment with her dead husband's shotgun and every warning in her head screaming at her. And then she said a word her mother would have slapped her for and set the gun against the fence post. "You stubborn fool," she muttered, kneeling down beside him. "You couldn't have picked a house with a man in it." He didn't answer. He'd gone under. The barn had been the plan. The barn was safe. The barn was cold, and the wind found every gap in the boards, and a man losing this much blood in a cold barn would be a corpse by morning. Evelyn knew that the way she knew the sun rose in the east. She got her hands under his arms and heaved, and he was heavier than he looked, all lean muscle and dead weight. And she was strong. She'd always been strong. Stronger than the whispering women in town ever gave her credit for. They looked at her size and saw softness. They'd never watched her drag a birthing calf out of a heifer by lantern light, or dig a fence post in July, or lift her husband's body off the ground the day the cattle trampled him and carry him herself, because there was no one else to do it. She half dragged, half carried Nathan Cole across the yard, and she did not take him to the barn. She took him inside. She'd regret it. She told herself that the whole way, straining under his weight, his blood soaking warm through her sleeve. She'd regret it, but she couldn't leave a dying man in the cold, not even a stranger, not even a man she should be afraid of. She wasn't that hollowed out yet. Whatever grief had taken from her, it hadn't taken that. She got him onto the floor by the hearth because she'd never get him up onto the bed, and she tore his shirt open and she saw the wound. Bad. Not the worst she'd seen, but bad. The bullet had gone in below the ribs and torn a channel along his side, and it hadn't come out. That was the trouble. A wound that bled clean and passed through that a body could mend. A wound with lead still buried in it went sour and killed a man slow screaming. "Nathan Cole," she said loud, patting his cheek. "Nathan, you wake up. You don't get to die on my floor, you hear? I did not haul your carcass in here to scrub you out of the rug." His eyes fluttered. "That the barn?" "No, that's my kitchen, and you should count yourself lucky. I'm too soft for my own good." She reached for the kettle. "The bullet's still in you." "I know. I have to take it out." "I know that too." His eyes found hers hazy but steady. "You ever done it before?" "Once." She didn't tell him it had been on a steer. "You're going to want to bite down on something. I don't have whiskey." "Everybody's got whiskey." "My husband did. I poured it in the creek the day after we buried him." She fetched a wooden spoon and pressed it against his lips. Bite. He caught her wrist. Weak, but he caught it, and for one cold instant, every fear came rushing back, and her free hand groped for the knife on the hearth. But he wasn't pulling her toward him. He was holding her still. "If I don't make it," he said thick around the spoon she'd half shoved in, "there's a bag on my saddle, under the blanket roll. You take whatever's in it, and you burn the rest. Don't read it. Don't show it to anybody. You just burn it. Promise me. You're not dying. Promise me anyway." Evelyn looked at him. A stranger. A man with a pistol and a wanted look and a secret worth guarding, with the last words in his mouth. She should have pried it loose from him right then, sick as he was, weak as he was. Any sensible woman would have. "I promise," she said instead. "Now bite down and don't you dare scream. I've had enough men wake me screaming in the night to last 3 lifetimes." She dug the bullet out by lamplight, her hands slick, her jaw set, and Nathan Cole did not scream. He shook. He bit through the spoon. Sweat poured off him, and he made sounds low in his chest like an animal caught in a fence. But he did not scream, and when she finally held the flattened lead up in the lamplight and dropped it ringing into a tin cup, he sagged back against the floor and breathed out one long shaking breath and said, "You've got steady hands, ma'am." "I've got tired hands." She pressed a folded cloth against the wound and leaned on it. "Hold that. Press hard." "Yes, ma'am." They stayed like that a long while, the fire popping, the wind working at the shutters, his blood slowing under her hands. She should have felt afraid. She kept waiting to feel afraid. Instead, she felt something she hadn't felt in over a year, something she had no name for, And it wasn't until much later that she understood it had simply been the presence of another living soul in a house that had been silent as a grave. "Why'd you bring me inside?" he asked after a time. His voice had gone soft and thick, the fever coming up in him. "You had your gun on me. You could have left me in the yard. Nobody'd have blamed you. Nobody'd have known. That too." Evelyn didn't answer right away. Then, "You pulled your horse off the water." "What?" "Out at the gate. You were bleeding to death, and you stopped your horse from foundering herself." She looked at the wound instead of at him. "A man who'll do that for a beast that can't thank him isn't the kind of man I have to be afraid of. Or if he is, I've forgotten how to tell, and either way, I've made my choice now." He was quiet so long she thought he'd passed out again. Then he said, barely above a whisper, "Nobody's said anything that kind to me in a long time. Don't make it into more than it is." "No, ma'am." "And stop calling me ma'am. It makes me feel like my mother." She wrung the cloth into the basin. "Evelyn Whitmore. This was my husband's ranch. It's mine now." Husband. Dead. Cattle took him. 14 months ago. She said it flat, the way you say a thing you've worn smooth from saying. "Before you get any ideas, there's no man coming home to this house. There's just me. And I've handled worse than you across this gate. I don't doubt it. You should sleep. If the fever breaks by morning, you'll live. If it doesn't." She shrugged, though he couldn't see it. "Then I was right the first time, and I'll dig 2 holes. A sound came out of him that might have been a laugh if a laugh could bleed. "You're a hard woman, Evelyn Whitmore. The country made me hard. I used to be soft. Soft got laughed at." She rose and fetched a blanket, the good one, and laid it over him, and she told herself it was practical. A man had to stay warm. To mend it meant nothing. Sleep. He slept. And Evelyn sat up in the chair by the fire with her husband's shotgun across her knees and watched a stranger breathe, and somewhere around midnight she realized she wasn't guarding herself against him anymore. She was guarding him against the dark. She didn't sleep at all. Morning came gray and slow. Nathan Cole was still alive, which surprised her, and the fever had broken sometime near dawn, which surprised her more. And when she pressed the back of her hand to his forehead, he stirred and caught her wrist again, but gentler this time, half asleep, like a man reaching for something in a dream. "Easy," she said. "It's just me." "Evelyn, you remembered. Good. Means the fever didn't cook your brains." She pulled her hand back and stood. "You're going to live. Don't make me sorry about it." He tried to sit up and thought better of it. "How long was I out?" "All night and half the morning. It's near 10. She set a cup of broth on the floor beside him. "Drink that. Slow. You lost enough blood to fill a bucket, and I'm not carrying you again." He drank it slow, and she watched him do it, and something about the way his hands shook, lifting the cup, and the way he thanked her twice for a bowl of watered beef made her chest ache in a way she didn't care for. She hadn't taken care of anybody in 14 months. She'd forgotten how much of herself it used out. "I owe you my life," he said when the cup was empty. "You owe me a clean floor and a story." She sat across from him. "You said men were hunting you. That true, or was that fever talk?" His face closed up. "It's true." "How many?" "Enough." "They coming here?" "They don't know where here is." He met her eyes. "I made sure of that. I rode a river 3 miles before I cut for your place. There's no trail to follow. I wouldn't have stopped otherwise. I wouldn't bring that down on anybody." "But if they found the trail, then you tell them the truth. A hurt man came, you patched him, he left. You point them any direction but the one I ride, and you're clear of it." He looked at her steadily. "You didn't do anything wrong taking me in. I want you to remember that whatever happens, you saved a stranger. That's the whole of what you did. You keep talking like you already know how this ends. Men like the ones after me, it usually ends one way." Evelyn studied him. He wasn't much older than her, maybe 5 years, though hard living had put 10 on his face. There was a stillness to him she'd only seen in 2 kinds of men, preachers and killers. She hadn't figured out yet which one he was. "What did you do," she asked, "to put men on your trail willing to shoot you off a horse?" "I know something they'd kill to bury." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give you, Evelyn." He said her name careful like it was something he'd been given and didn't want to break. "The less you know, the safer you are. I mean that. The things I know have already killed better people than me. I'm not going to hand them to a woman who saved my life. That's the one decent thing I've got left to do keeping you out of it." She wanted to be angry with him. She'd earned the truth, hadn't she? Digging a bullet out of him with her bare hands. But there was something in the way he refused her that felt more like protection than deceit. And she was so unused to a man wanting to protect her that it caught her off guard. "Fine," she said. "Keep your secrets. But you'll keep them from my barn, not my kitchen. You can mend out there where you meant to sleep in the first place. The second you can sit a horse, you're gone. That's fair." "I know it's fair. I made it fair." She stood and gathered the bloody cloths. "There's an old cot in the barn loft. You'll have hay and a roof, and I'll bring you food twice a day, and nobody comes down that road but the mail rider on Thursdays, and a merchant now and then, and if any of them come, you stay quiet and you stay hid. Understand?" "Yes, ma'am, Evelyn." Good. She got him out to the barn that afternoon, slow his arm across her shoulders, and it took the better part of an hour to move him a distance. She could have walked in a minute, and by the end of it, they were both sweating and swearing, and he'd apologized so many times. She finally told him if he said sorry one more time, she'd leave him in the yard for the buzzards. He laughed at that, a real one, and it changed his whole face, and she looked away because she didn't want to see how it changed his whole face. She got him settled in the loft. She saw to his horse the big gray roan who let her lead her to water, and stood patient while she checked her feet. A good animal, a well-loved animal. She did not go through his saddlebags. She'd promised. And Evelyn Whitmore kept her promises even when it cost her, because a promise was the only thing out here that couldn't be taken from you, only given away. She kept his secret in the barn for 3 days. 3 days of carrying broth and bread and clean water out across the yard. 3 days of sitting on an overturned bucket in the barn loft while he mended, telling herself she was only there to change the dressing, and finding herself still there, an hour later, talking. He was easy to talk to, which she hadn't expected. He listened the way most men didn't like the words mattered like she mattered, and it had been so long since a man had listened to her that she found herself telling him things she hadn't said out loud to a living soul. She told him about her husband Samuel, about the good years and the hard ones, about the morning of the accident, the sound the cattle made, the way she'd run, and known before she got there that running wouldn't help. She told him about the town, about the women who clucked their tongues, and the men who offered to buy her land for half its worth, certain a widow her size and her sorrow couldn't hold it. She told him she'd sworn she'd sooner burn the ranch than sell it to them, and she meant it. And she watched him nod like he understood exactly the particular pride of holding on to a thing everyone expects you to lose. "They think you're going to fail," he said. It wasn't a question. "They're counting on it. There's a man, Caleb Mercer, biggest ranch in the county. He's had his eye on my water rights since before Samuel died. He sent men round after the funeral, real polite, real sorry for my loss. Real interested in my South Creek." Her mouth twisted. "I ran them off with the same gun I nearly used on you." Nathan had gone very still. "Mercer. You know him." "I know the name." Something had gone out of his voice, and something cold had come into it. "Big man, silver hair, talks soft and smiles while he takes everything you've got." "That's him." Evelyn frowned. "How's a drifter like you know Caleb Mercer?" "Everybody in this part of the country knows Caleb Mercer." He looked away. "Or knows to be afraid of him." She should have pushed harder right then. Later, she'd think about that, about how close the truth had come, and how she'd let it slide past, because she liked sitting on that bucket talking to him, and she didn't want to spoil it with hard questions. Loneliness makes fools of the strongest people. She'd have told anyone that. She just hadn't thought it could make a fool of her. On the 3rd day, she found the poster. It wasn't snooping. She'd told herself she wouldn't touch his bag and she hadn't, but his coat had gotten soaked, hauling water, and she'd taken it to dry by the fire. And when she lifted it, a folded paper slid out of the inside pocket and fell open at her feet. And she saw it before she could stop herself, before she could look away. A wanted poster. Wanted. It said across the top in big black letters, and below that, a rough drawing of a face she knew now, a face she'd been feeding broth to for 3 days, and below that, a name. Only, the name wasn't Nathan Cole. Silas Blackwood, the poster said. Wanted for robbery, cattle theft, and the murder of Sheriff Thomas Reed. And a number, under that a reward more money than Evelyn had seen in her life, more money than her whole ranch was worth, offered for the man in her barn, dead or alive. Murder. She stood in her kitchen with the poster shaking in her hand, and the fire crackling, and everything she'd let herself feel over 3 days curdled into something sick and cold. She'd taken a murderer into her home. She'd fed him with her own hands. She'd told him about Samuel, about her grief, about her water rights. She'd sat on a bucket and told a wanted killer the shape of her whole lonely life, and he'd sat there and listened, and never once told her that the marshal would put a rope around his neck if they ever found him, or that there was a fortune on his head, or that his name was a lie. The betrayal came first, hot and fast. Then the fear. Then underneath both something worse, the memory of him pulling his horse off the water. The memory of him refusing the truth to keep her safe. The memory of his hands shaking around a cup of broth, thanking her twice. Murderers didn't do that. Did they? She didn't know. That was the terrible thing. She didn't know what murderers did because the only thing she knew about murder was that it had a face now, and the face had a kind voice and gentle hands, and it was lying in her barn loft healing because of her. Evelyn folded the poster along its creases. She fetched the shotgun, and she walked out across the yard in the gray light with her jaw set and murder in her hands, and the wind pulling at her skirts. And she climbed the ladder to the loft one-handed, the gun in the other, and she stood at the top of it, looking down at the man she'd saved. He was awake. He saw the gun. He saw the poster. And he didn't reach for his pistol, which she'd left him, fool that she was, and he didn't run, which he couldn't have anyway, and he didn't lie. "You found it," he said quietly. "Silas Blackwood." Her voice came out cold as the wind. "Sheriff Thomas Reed. Murder." "Yes." "That your name, Blackwood?" "It was. A long time ago. I don't answer to it anymore." "You murdered a lawman." "No." He sat up slow, both hands where she could see them wincing at the wound. "I didn't. That's the one thing on that paper that's a lie. Evelyn and I know you've got no reason on this earth to believe me. But it's the one thing I'll swear to with my life. I've done wrong. God knows I've done wrong. I rode with bad men, and I did bad things, and I've got no right to sit here in your barn and ask you for anything. But I did not kill Tom Reed. I would have died before I hurt that man. In the end, I damn near did. Every guilty man says he's innocent." "Yes, they do." He didn't argue it. "And you've got a gun, and I've got a wound, and there's a fortune on my head. And the smart thing, the safe thing is for you to march me to the marshal or put a bullet in me yourself and be done with it. I won't stop you. I mean that. I won't lift a hand. After what you did for me, if you need to do that to feel safe, then you do it and I'll go easy." Evelyn's arm was starting to shake from holding the gun so long. She didn't lower it. "Why?" she said. "Why let me feed you and tend you and talk to you 3 days and never say a word? Why let me tell you about Samuel and my land and my whole miserable life when the whole time you knew you were—" Her voice cracked. She hated that it cracked. "You made a fool of me." "No." He said it hard, the first hard thing he'd said to her. "No, I never did that. Not once. Everything I said to you was true. Everything you told me I was glad to hear, and I never once thought less of you, or laughed at you, or saw you as anything but the bravest, kindest person who's crossed my path in years. That's the truth, Evelyn. I kept my name from you because knowing it puts a rope around your neck alongside mine. Harboring me is a crime. Feeding me is a crime. The less you knew, the more I could protect you when they came. That's the only reason. I swear it on Tom Reed's grave, and there is no name I'd swear on that means more to me. She believed him. That was the trouble. Standing there with a shotgun and a wanted poster, and every good reason in the world not to. She believed him, and she hated herself for believing him, because believing him meant she was exactly the soft fool the whole town said she was. "Tell me," she said. "All of it. No more keeping me safe. I decide what I can carry, not you. You've been under my roof 3 days. I've earned the truth, Silas Blackwood or Nathan Cole, or whoever you are. You tell me who you are, and what you did, and who's hunting you, and you tell me straight, and if I don't like the sound of it, I'll walk you to the marshal myself. But you're done deciding what I get to know." He looked at her a long moment. And then something in his shoulders let go some weight he'd been carrying so long he'd stopped feeling it, and he nodded. "All right," he said. "Sit down then. It's a long story, and you won't like most of it." "I didn't figure I would." She lowered the gun at last, though she kept it across her lap, and she sat on the edge of the loft with her back to the ladder and her eyes on him. "Start at the beginning. Start with your real name. Silas Blackwood. That's real. I was born Silas Blackwood in Missouri, and I had a mother who taught me right from wrong and a father who drank himself into an early grave and left us nothing but debt." He said it flat, no pity in it. "I came west at 17 looking for work. Found it too. Just not the honest kind. Mercer. Not at first. First it was small things. Riding with men who weren't particular about whose cattle they moved or whose fences they cut. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I'd get straight once I had a little money set by." His jaw worked. A man can tell himself that for a lot of years before he notices he's become the thing he was pretending to be. And Mercer, Caleb Mercer, found me when I was 22. He had a way of finding men like me, men with nothing to lose and a talent for the wrong things. Silas looked at his own hands. He didn't hire guns, he collected them, made you feel like you belonged to something, like you mattered. And then once he had you, once you'd done a thing or two you couldn't take back, he owned you. Because if you crossed him, he'd hand you to the law with your crimes wrapped up in a bow and keep his own hands clean. Evelyn was very quiet. "What things did he have you do? You want the truth." "I asked for it. I frightened people, families mostly, homesteaders sitting on land or water Mercer wanted." His voice had gone rough. "I never killed anybody. I want you to hear that whatever else you decide about me, I never killed a soul. But I rode up to a lot of doors with a lot of hard men, and I let good people see the guns and understand what would happen if they didn't sell cheap and move on. I ran folks off their land, Evelyn. Folks like you. Widows, old men, families with children who'd worked ground for 10 years. He couldn't look at her now. "I told myself I was just there, just riding along, that I never pulled a trigger so my hands were clean. But I've come to understand there's no clean hands in a thing like that. Being there is enough. Letting it happen when you could have stopped it is enough." Evelyn thought of the men Caleb Mercer had sent to her door after Samuel died. Polite men, sorry for your loss men, men who'd looked at her land and her grief and her body like all three were things to be taken cheap. She thought about how close she'd come to being one of the widows he'd run off, and how it might have been a man just like this one at her gate, guns showing, letting her understand. "You could have been one of them," she said. "The men who came for my water. I could have been." He met her eyes then, and there was no excuse in his face, only a plain and terrible honesty. "In another year, another season, Mercer might have sent me to your door, and I'd have come. That's the man I was. I won't pretend to you I wasn't." She should have been more afraid of him for saying it. Instead, strangely, she was less. A liar would have softened it. A liar would have painted himself the reluctant hero. This man laid his sins out plain on the loft floor between them and didn't reach to cover a single one, and Evelyn had spent her whole life around men who could not admit a fault to save their lives, and there was something in his plainness that she couldn't help but trust. "So what changed?" she asked. "You're not riding for Mercer now. He's got men shooting you off horses. What happened?" Silas was quiet a moment, gathering it. "Tom Reed happened," he said. "Sheriff Thomas Reed, the man they say I killed." "Tell me." "He was the sheriff over in the next county. Honest as the day is long, which out here is about the rarest thing there is. Mercer had bought every lawman for 100 miles, but he never could buy Tom Reed, and it drove him half mad." A faint, sad smile. Reed knew what Mercer was, knew about the land grabs, the bribes the families run off, and he'd been building a case, quiet, careful, collecting papers, deeds, letters, proof of every crooked deal Mercer ever made, enough to hang him, enough to bring the whole thing down. "How do you know all this?" "Because Tom Reed came to me." Silas's voice went low. "One night alone, no deputies, just him. Rode right into a camp full of Mercer's guns like the bravest fool in Kansas. Everybody's hand went to their iron. And Reed just sat his horse and looked at me, only me out of all of them. And he said, 'Blackwood, I've been watching you. You're not like these others. You've still got something left in you worth saving. And I've got an offer.'" Evelyn found she was holding her breath. "He wanted me to turn," Silas said. "Testify. Tell the marshal everything I'd seen Mercer do. In return, he'd see me cleared of the small crimes, given a chance to start over honest." And I laughed at him. God help me, I laughed in his face because I was 26 and stupid and scared, and I thought a man like me didn't get chances like that. He swallowed. But he'd planted something, and it grew. And over the next few months I couldn't ride up to another door and frighten another family without hearing Tom Reed's voice in my head saying I was worth more than that. So one night I rode to his house, alone, and I told him yes. "You turned." I turned, and it got him killed. The words came out cracked. Somehow Mercer found out. To this day I don't know how. But he found out that Reed had proof, and that I'd agreed to testify, and he decided to end both problems in one night. His men rode to Reed's house. I got there just after. Just after. He pressed a hand to his eyes. Tom Reed was dying on his own floor, shot through, and I was holding him, and he was pressing something into my hand papers, the proof, all of it, and he was saying, "Get it to Abilene. There's a marshal, honest man, get it to him. Don't let them bury it with me." And then he was gone. And I was kneeling in his blood with his evidence in my hands when Mercer's men came back to make sure the job was done, and they saw me there, and they knew. They knew I'd turned. They knew I had the proof. So they pinned it on you. So they pinned it on me. Silas laughed a broken sound. It was easy. A known outlaw found over the sheriff's body holding the man's own papers. Mercer had lawmen in his pocket to swear to whatever he wanted. By sunrise, there were posters with my face on them. Silas Blackwood, murderer of Sheriff Tom Reed. The one man in the world who ever offered me a way out, and they made the world believe I put him in his grave. His voice dropped to almost nothing. And I've been running ever since. 2 years. Every man's hand against me. The proof still hidden where I stashed it that night, because I can't get near Abilene without walking into a rope, and Mercer's men hunting me across 3 states, because as long as I'm alive, there's a man breathing who knows the truth. The barn was silent except for the wind and the shift of the horse below, and the long, uneven sound of Silas Blackwood breathing. Evelyn didn't say anything for a while. She sat with the shotgun across her knees and the poster in her hand, and she looked at this hunted, honest, ruined man, and she turned his story over in her mind, looking for the lie in it, the crack, the place where a con man's tale falls apart. She'd been fooled before. She knew how a smooth story could be built to open a lonely woman's heart and her purse both. But this story didn't open anything. It closed things. It gave her every reason to hand him over, every reason to run, and he'd told it anyway. All of it. The shameful parts worst of all. And a man building a lie to soften a widow's heart did not confess to running families off their land. A man building a lie made himself the victim from the first breath. Silas Blackwood had made himself the villain, and only near the end let one thread of the tragedy show, and that more than anything he could have said was what made her believe him. "The papers," she said at last. "The proof, it's still hidden, in Abilene." "Near there. I stashed it the night Reed died before the posters went up, before I understood how bad it was." He looked at her. "It's still there. I'd stake my life on it. Nobody's found it, or Mercer would have stopped hunting me. He's still hunting me. That means it's still out there, still able to hang him if a man could get it to the right hands. But you can't get near it. I can't get near anything. Every marshal in Kansas has my face memorized." He shook his head slowly. "So I run. And Mercer's men close a little tighter every season. And one of these days they'll catch me, and the proof will rot where I hid it, and Tom Reed will have died for nothing, and every family Mercer ever ruined will stay ruined." He met her eyes, and there was no plea in it, just plain exhaustion. "That's the whole of it, Evelyn. That's who's sleeping in your barn. A man who did wrong tried to do right, and got a good man killed for the trouble. Now you know it all. Now you decide." Evelyn Whitmore sat there in the gray light with her husband's shotgun and a dead man's name written on a paper in her lap, and she thought about Caleb Mercer's polite men at her gate, and her South Creek, and the families she'd never met, who'd been run off ground they'd bled for. She thought about how everyone in town was so certain she was soft and weak and finished. She thought about how a widow her size and her sorrow wasn't supposed to be able to hold a ranch, let alone anything harder. And she thought about the fact that of all the doors in Kansas, this hunted man had fallen at hers. And of all the widows he could have lied to, he'd told her the truth. "You said the marshal in Abilene is honest," she said slowly. "Reed said so. Reed knew men. And the proof that clears you and hangs Mercer, it's still out there. And the only thing standing between it and daylight is that your face is on every poster from here to the territory line." That's about the size of it. Evelyn was quiet a long moment. Then she set the shotgun aside, deliberate, and she folded the wanted poster in half, and she looked Silas Blackwood dead in the eye. "My face isn't on any poster," she said. He went very still. "Nobody hunts a fat widow who lost her husband to a cattle stampede," she said, and her voice didn't shake at all now. "Nobody looks twice at me. The whole county's decided I'm too soft and too broken and too alone to be worth a second glance. Caleb Mercer's own men stood in my yard and saw nothing but a woman they figured would sell cheap." She leaned forward. "You can't get near Abilene, Silas Blackwood, but I can go anywhere I please, and not a soul will wonder why." "No." He shook his head hard. "No, absolutely not. You don't know what these men are. You don't know what Mercer does to people who cross him. You've got no idea what you'd be walking into, and I will not. I will not be the reason another good soul dies in the dirt because they tried to help me. I came here for one night. One. I'll be gone soon as I can ride, and you'll be clear of the whole thing. And the proof rots, and Mercer wins, and the next widow he sends men to, maybe she doesn't have a shotgun. Evelyn, you don't get to decide that for me." She stood, and she was tall, and in the gray loft light, with the wind at the boards, she did not look soft or broken or finished. She looked like a woman who had dug a bullet out of a stranger with her own 2 hands and buried a husband she'd carried herself. "You told me you were done keeping me safe by keeping me ignorant. Well, I'm done being kept out of things by men who look at me and see somebody who needs protecting. I've protected this ranch alone for 14 months. I ran off Mercer's men once already. I am not the person this county thinks I am, and I am tired. I am so tired of being underestimated by everyone who lays eyes on me." Silas stared at her. And slowly, something changed in his face, the way it had changed when he'd first laughed, only deeper. A woman who had every reason on earth to fear him, to turn him in, to want him gone, was standing in her own barn, offering to walk into the fire for a truth that wasn't even hers. "Why?" he said hoarse. "Why would you do that? For a man you met 3 days ago? For a man whose real name you learned an hour ago off a wanted poster?" Evelyn looked at him for a long time. "Because you pulled your horse off the water," she said, "and because somebody has to stand up to Caleb Mercer before he runs off every soul in this county who can't afford to fight him. And because for 14 months I've been waiting to die slow on a ranch full of ghosts. And this is the first thing that's felt like living since they put Samuel in the ground." her jaw set. So you're going to heal up, and you're going to eat what I bring you and get your strength back. And then Silas Blackwood, you and I are going to Abilene, and we are going to bring that proof into the daylight, and we are going to see Caleb Mercer answer for every family he ever ruined, including whatever he was planning to do to me. The wind moved through the barn. The gray horse shifted below. And Silas Blackwood, wanted for a murder he didn't commit, hunted across 3 states, half-healed and wholly out of hope, looked up at the widow. Everyone had written off and found for the first time in 2 years that he wasn't alone. "You're a hard woman, Evelyn Whitmore," he said quietly, and this time it sounded like the finest thing a man could say to another soul. "The country made me hard," she said. "You'd best hope it made me hard enough." And she picked up the empty broth cup and the folded poster and her husband's shotgun, and she climbed down the ladder into the gray morning, and she did not feel afraid, and she did not feel alone. And for the first time in 14 months, walking back across her own yard, Evelyn Whitmore felt something rise in her chest that she was almost afraid to name, because the last time she'd felt it, she'd still had a husband and a future and a heart that hadn't yet learned what it cost to hope. She named it anyway. Hope. God help her hope. The healing took 9 days, and Evelyn counted every one of them. She counted them because each morning she carried broth across the yard. She found herself wondering whether this was the day Caleb Mercer's men came riding down her road, and each night she lay awake, listening to the wind, and telling herself the sound of it wasn't hoofbeats. She'd made her choice in the loft that gray morning. She hadn't unmade it. But choosing a thing and living with the weight of it were 2 different animals, and the weight settled on her a little heavier each day. On the 4th day, Silas could sit up without going pale. On the 6th, he could stand and walk the length of the barn holding the wall. On the 8th, Evelyn came out to find him already up currying the gray roan with slow, careful strokes, favoring his side, but steady on his feet, and she stopped in the doorway and watched him a moment before he knew she was there. "You're supposed to be resting," she said. He didn't jump. He'd known she was there. She could tell by the way he kept brushing. A man can only lie in the hay so long before he starts to rot. Bess needed tending. He patted the roan's neck. "She's been patient with all this. Bess, after my mother." He said it plain, but there was something under it, and Evelyn filed it away. The small, tender fact of a hunted man naming his horse after his dead mother. She was learning him in pieces like that. A stolen glimpse here, a plain admission there. He gave up nothing easy, but what he gave was true, and she'd stopped waiting for the lie to show. It hadn't shown in 8 days. She didn't think it was coming. "We need to talk about Abilene," she said, his hand stilled on the horse's neck. "Evelyn, don't." She came into the barn and set the broth down on the overturned bucket that had become over these days something like her chair. "I know that voice. That's the voice you use when you're about to tell me you'll go it alone and leave me clear of it. I've heard it 4 times now. It doesn't work any better than the first time. It's not that I don't—" He stopped, started over. "You've got a life here. A ranch. Something to lose. I've got a horse and a wanted poster. If this goes bad, I lose a thing that's already mostly lost. You lose everything. And if you go alone, you lose your life inside a week, and the proof rots and Mercer wins, and I go back to waiting to die slow on a ranch full of ghosts." She sat. "I've done that math, Silas. I did it the first night. It always comes out the same." He looked at her a long moment, and then he did the thing she was starting to understand was rare for him. He gave in. Not sullen, not resentful, just a man setting down an argument he'd finally decided he couldn't win. "All right," he said quietly. "Then we do it smart. We don't ride in like fools. There's a lot you don't know yet, and if you're coming, you need to know it because knowing it might be the only thing that keeps you breathing. So tell me." He set the curry comb down and lowered himself onto a hay bale, careful of his side, and he told her. He told her about the men Mercer kept close. A gunman named Dutch Rollins who'd killed more men than smallpox and enjoyed it. A tracker half Comanche, half something else, who could follow a trail 3 weeks cold across bare rock. a man called Quiet Joe, who'd never been heard to speak. And Mercer's foreman, a cold-eyed devil named Harlan Voss, who ran the dirty work, so Mercer's hands stayed clean. The man who'd led the ride on Tom Reed's house, the man Silas swore he'd know by the sound of his spurs in the dark. "These are the men who'll come," Silas said. "Not all of them, maybe, but some. And they don't frighten people like I used to frighten people. They kill. If they figure out where I've been, if they find this ranch, they won't stand in your yard and make you understand. They'll burn you out and salt the ground and ride off whistling." Evelyn kept her face still. "Then we'd best be gone before they figure it out." "That's the idea. Where's the proof exactly? If I'm to walk into a strange town alone and fetch it, I need to know where I'm walking." He hesitated. And she saw it. The old instinct, the reflex to keep her ignorant, to keep her safe. And she saw him fight it down. "There's a church," he said, 3 miles east of Abilene on the old road. Little white church hasn't had a preacher in years. Congregation moved into town when the town grew. Building still standing though, or was. There's a loose stone in the foundation back corner north side low to the ground. I pulled it out that night and I put the papers in oilcloth behind it and I put the stone back and I marked it with a scratch. A cross cut into the stone with my knife. His jaw tightened. It's been 2 years. The church could have burned, could have fallen, somebody could have torn it down for lumber. But if it's standing, that's where it is, behind the marked stone north corner. Evelyn committed it to memory the way she committed weather signs and calving dates, deep and permanent. A church, loose stone, north corner, crossmark. That's it. And the marshal. Reed said his name was Kettering, Marshal Ambrose Kettering. Honest, Reed said, and Reed didn't hand out that word cheap. Silas rubbed his face. But 2 years is a long time. Kettering might be dead, might be gone, might have been bought since. I don't know. That's the piece I can't see. You take the proof to the wrong lawman and you hand it straight back to Mercer and you die for it. So I find out about Kettering before I trust him with anything. You find out careful. You ask soft questions in a town full of strangers and you trust nobody and you assume the worst about everybody. And if anything smells wrong, you get out and you leave the proof where it lies. He leaned forward. Promise me that. If it turns bad, you don't play the hero. You walk away, and you come back to me, and we think again. Dead, you help nobody. Promise me. I promise, she said, and meant it, and saw him relax a fraction, and understood that he'd needed her word the way she'd needed his that first night. They were building something between them, one promise at a time, and neither of them had said so out loud. They spent the 9th day making ready. Evelyn packed for a journey she told the mail rider was to visit a cousin in Salina, and the lie came easy because everyone expected a lonely widow to go looking for family. She loaded a wagon with just enough to be believable and hid what mattered underneath food water. Blankets, powder, and shot, and Samuel's old revolver, oiled and loaded and wrapped in a flour sack. Silas watched her work with an expression she couldn't read. "What?" she said finally. "You've done this before, made ready to leave in a hurry." "Never. I've never left this place a day since I married into it." She tucked the flour sack under the wagon seat. "But I've buried a husband and held a ranch alone and stared down men who wanted my land. Making ready to fight isn't so different whatever you're fighting." Something crossed his face. Admiration maybe, and under it something warmer that neither of them was ready to look at directly. He looked away first. They planned to leave before dawn. That was the plan. Slip out in the dark, take the low road, be 20 miles gone before anyone in town wondered where the widow Whitmore had got to. It was a good plan. It died at moonrise. Bess heard them first. The gray roan threw her head up in the barn and stamped, and Silas was on his feet, before Evelyn understood why one hand pressing his half-healed side, the other already reaching for his pistol. "Douse the lamp," he said low and hard. "Now." She doused it. The dark came down, and in the dark she heard what the horse had heard, what Silas had heard riders, more than one. Coming down her road slow, the way men came when they didn't want to be heard coming, and her heart went to ice in her chest, because there was only one reason men rode quiet toward a widow's house at moonrise. They found the trail, she breathed. Maybe just found the ranch and got curious. Silas was at the window, pistol up, peering through the crack in the shutter. Can't tell how many, 3, 4. They've stopped at the gate. That's where you stopped. I know. His voice was flat and cold, a voice she hadn't heard from him before, the voice of the man he used to be. Evelyn, listen to me. Whatever happens, you don't tell them I'm here. You're a widow alone. You never saw a hurt man. You point them any direction but east, and you cry a little, and you let them go. You hear me? I'm not letting them. You are. He turned from the window and gripped her arm, and it wasn't rough, but it was urgent, more urgent than she'd ever heard him. If they find me here, they kill us both. If they don't find me, you live. The proof still gets to Abilene. You go without me. You've got the church, the stone, the marshal's name. You don't need me for any of it. I'm the only thing here worth killing. So you give them nothing, and you let me handle what comes. And what comes for you? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. She saw it in the set of his jaw, the way he checked the loads in his pistol by feel the way a man does when he's counting bullets against the number of men who've come to kill him and coming up short. Someone hammered on the farmhouse door across the yard. Widow Whitmore! A voice, loud, false, friendly, carrying across the dark. Widow Whitmore, you in there? We mean you no harm, ma'am. Just a few questions is all. Evelyn's blood ran cold because the voice was polite. It was the same polite Mercer's men had used at her gate 14 months ago. Sorry for your loss, polite, interested in your creek, polite, the politeness of men who smiled while they took everything. She knew that voice. She'd run it off her land once. That's Voss, Silas whispered, and every muscle in him had gone rigid. That's Harlan Voss, the one who killed Reed. You're sure? I'd know that voice in my grave. The hammering came again harder. Widow, I can see you got no lamp lit, but a woman alone don't sleep this early. Open up now. We're just going to talk. And Evelyn Whitmore made a decision that stopped Silas Blackwood's heart in his chest. She stepped toward the barn door. What are you doing? He caught her both hands. Now pain be damned. Evelyn, if I don't answer that door, they search the place. She pried his hands off her, gentle but immovable. If they search the place, they find you. If I answer it, I send them off, same as I did before. I've done this, Silas. I ran Mercer's men off this ground once, with nothing but a shotgun and a hard face. I can do it again. That was before Reed. That was polite men doing polite dirty work. This is Voss. This man kills. You don't understand what he is. Then I'd best not give him a reason. She lifted her chin. Stay hid. Stay quiet. Keep that pistol on the door, and if it goes wrong, you know what to do. But it's not going to go wrong because I am very, very good at being a woman. Nobody takes seriously. And I am about to be the most harmless widow this side of the Kansas River. She squeezed his arm once hard. Trust me. You asked me to trust you. Now it's your turn. And before he could stop her, before he could do anything but stare, she was out the barn door and crossing the dark yard toward her house, calling out in a voice she'd made trembling and soft and frightened. An old woman's voice, a helpless voice, a voice that was a lie, built to save both their lives. I'm coming. Lord, I'm coming. Don't break my door down. A body can't get her wrapper on fast enough for you men. She came around the corner of the house into the moonlight, and there they were. 4 of them mounted and one down off his horse at her door, with his fist raised to hammer again. She'd been right about the number. She hadn't been ready for the look of them. These weren't the smooth land agents from before. These were hard men killing men, and the one at her door turned to look at her, and she knew before he spoke that this was Harlan Voss, because looking at him was like looking at something dead that had learned to walk. There she is, Voss said, and smiled, and the smile was the worst thing about him. Evening, ma'am, didn't mean to frighten you. Frighten me? At this hour, 4 men on horses hammering fit to wake the dead. Evelyn clutched her wrapper at her throat and let her voice shake. I'm a widow woman alone out here, mister. And you like to have given me a heart seizure. What in the Lord's name do you want? Just looking for a man. Voss came a step closer, and she made herself hold her ground when everything in her screamed to back away. Wounded fella. Rode this direction some days back. Shot in the side. We've got reason to think he came through this country. His eyes moved over her, over the house, over the dark yard, missing nothing. You seen anybody like that stranger asking for help man on a gray horse? And Evelyn Whitmore, who had never been much of a liar in her life, told the finest lie of it. A wounded man. She let her eyes go wide, then narrow, then frightened. There was a rider. 4 or 5 days back, maybe. I didn't get close. I'm not a fool. A woman alone doesn't run out to greet strangers. He watered his horse at my far trough and rode on. Didn't come to the house. I watched him from the window with my husband's gun in my hand, the whole while, God rest him. She let her voice tremble harder. Gray horse, you said, might have been gray. I couldn't say for certain, it was near dark. But he rode off north and west toward the Salina Road. I remember thinking, thank the Lord he's not stopping here. She watched Voss's face. She watched it the way she'd watched Silas's face for the lie that never came. Only now she was praying her own lie would hold. Voss studied her, and the smile never moved, and for a long, terrible moment she couldn't tell if he believed a word of it. North and west, he said. Toward Salina. That's the direction he took. I watched till he was out of sight. I was that afraid he'd turn back. She wrapped her arms around herself. Please, mister. I don't want any trouble. I've had enough trouble for one lifetime. I just want you men to go on and leave a poor widow be. Behind Voss, one of the mounted men spoke. Boss, been 4 days. If he watered here and rode north, he's 100 miles gone by now. Maybe, Voss said. He hadn't taken his eyes off Evelyn. Maybe he is. And then, casual terrible. Mind if we look in your barn, ma'am? Wouldn't want to leave a hurt man dying in a widow's outbuilding without her knowing. Neighborly thing to do to check. Evelyn's heart stopped. In the barn 40 feet away, Silas Blackwood was standing in the dark with a pistol on this door and half a wound in his side, and if Voss walked into that barn there would be dead men in her yard within the minute, and one of them would be Silas, and maybe her too. She did not let one flicker of it reach her face. You want to look in my barn? She let anger come into her voice now. Real anger, the anger of a proud woman pushed too far because anger was safer than fear, and truer too. At this hour, 4 strange men. You want to go poking through my property in the dark. Mister, I don't know you from Adam, and you come hammering my door at moonrise, and now you want into my barn? She drew herself up to her full height, and she was not a small woman, and in the moonlight with her jaw set, she was not harmless at all. My husband's buried not a year. This is all I've got left of him, this house and that barn, and the ground it sits on, and I have run off better-dressed men than you, who wanted a look at what's mine. You want in my barn, you bring me a marshal with a paper that says you can, and until then, you can sit your horse on the far side of my gate, where I first told your kind to stay. The words hung in the moonlight. She'd gambled everything on them on the one thing she knew about men like this, which was that a woman's fear invited them, and a woman's fury confused them because in their world, the weak stayed weak, and the frightened stayed frightened, and a widow who talked back was a thing they didn't have a ready answer for. Voss looked at her, and something shifted in his dead eyes, a flicker of what might have been amusement, or might have been the beginning of murder. You've got sand, widow, he said softly. I'll give you that. I've got a grave to tend and a ranch to run, and no time for men who won't take a plain answer. He rode north, toward Salina. That's all I know, and all I'll say, and if you're gentlemen, you'll tip your hats and go, and if you're not, well. She let the sentence hang. I've buried one man on this ground. I know how to dig. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. Then Voss laughed. A short, dry, humorless sound, and he touched the brim of his hat, mock courteous, and he backed toward his horse. North and west, he said. Toward Salina. Much obliged, ma'am. You've been a great help. He swung up into the saddle, easy, despite his size, and gathered his reins. You take care out here all alone. Never know what kind of men might come riding down a lonely road." And he smiled that smile one last time, and Evelyn understood it for exactly what it was. A promise, not a farewell. They rode out, north and west toward Selena into the dark, and Evelyn stood in her yard and watched them until the sound of them faded into the night, and then longer, until she was sure, until her legs were shaking so hard she had to put a hand on the corner of the house to stay upright. She'd done it. She'd sent Harlan Voss riding off in the wrong direction with a lie built out of moonlight and pride, and she was still breathing, and so was the man in her barn. She waited. 10 minutes. 20. When she was certain they weren't circling back, she crossed the dark yard on unsteady legs and slipped into the barn, and Silas was right where she'd left him, pistol still up, and when she came through the door, he lowered it and crossed to her in 2 strides and took her by the shoulders and looked at her like a man looking at someone come back from the dead. "You're all right." It wasn't a question. It was a prayer he was checking the truth of. "They're gone. You sent them north. I heard it all." His hands tightened on her shoulders. "Evelyn, that was the most reckless, foolish, brave thing I have ever seen a person do. And if you ever do anything like it again, I'll—" He stopped. He didn't seem to know how the sentence ended. Neither did she. "You'll what?" she said, breathless, her heart still hammering. "I don't know." He let out a shaking breath, and something broke open in his face, some wall he'd kept up for 2 years of running. "I don't know. Nobody's ever put themselves in front of a gun for me before. I don't have the words for it. I stood in that dark and listened to Harlan Voss ask to search this barn, and I had my pistol on that door, and I thought, this is it. This is where a good woman dies because of me. And then you—" His voice cracked clean through. "You talked him off your land. You ran the man who killed Tom Reed off your land, with nothing but your voice." "I ran him off once before," she said, "with a shotgun that time. Turns out I didn't even need the shotgun." She was trembling and laughing and near to crying all at once, the fear pouring out of her now that it was safe to feel it. "Silas, he'll come back. You know that. He didn't believe me all the way. I saw it. He'll ride to Selena and find no trail, and he'll come back, and he'll be angry, and he won't ask to search the barn. Next time he'll just search it. I know." The lawman cold came back into his voice, but his hands stayed gentle on her shoulders. "Which is why we don't wait for dawn. We go now, tonight, while he's riding the wrong way. It buys us a day, maybe 2, and out here a day is the difference between living and dying." He looked at her. "You're sure? Last chance to be sure. You come with me, there's no going back to being the harmless widow. Voss saw your face. He'll remember it. If this goes wrong, there's no lie left that saves you." Evelyn thought about it. She made herself think about it. Really think, standing in her barn in the middle of the night with her whole quiet, grieving life on one side of a line, and something wild and dangerous and alive on the other. "There was never any going back," she said. "There hasn't been since the night you pulled your horse off the water. Hitch the wagon. I'll get the rest." They were gone within the hour. They took the low road, the one that ran along the creek bottom, where the ground was soft and the trees hid a wagon from the moonlight, and Evelyn drove while Silas lay in the wagon bed under a blanket with his pistol, watching the road behind them, and neither of them spoke for the first long while, because there was nothing to say that the situation hadn't already said for them. Behind them, her house sat dark and empty. Everything she'd held on to for 14 months, the ranch, the ground, the ghosts, all of it left behind on a gamble that a hunted man was telling the truth. When they'd put 10 miles between themselves and the ranch, Silas climbed up onto the seat beside her, careful of his side, and for a while they just rode the wagon creaking, the mule plodding the night, vast and dark around them. "Tell me about Reed," Evelyn said finally. "The real Reed, not the sheriff on the poster, the man." Silas was quiet a moment. "Why?" "Because we're driving through the dark toward a town that wants to hang you to fetch papers that got a good man killed, and I've bet my whole life on a story you told me in a barn loft. I'd like to know the man at the center of it. I'd like to know he was worth it." So Silas told her about Tom Reed, about a lawman who'd once ridden 40 miles in a blizzard to bring medicine to a homestead full of sick children who weren't even in his county. About a man who'd never drawn his gun on a soul he didn't have to, who kept a garden behind the jailhouse and gave the vegetables away, who'd looked at a hard case outlaw named Silas Blackwood and seen God knew how something worth saving. And as he talked, his voice changed, warmed, grieved, and Evelyn understood that whatever else was true or false about the man beside her, this much was bone-deep real. He had loved Tom Reed, and losing him and being blamed for it had hollowed something out of Silas Blackwood that hadn't grown back in 2 years of running. "He'd have liked you," Silas said near the end. "Reed, he'd have looked at you talking Harlan Voss off your porch, and he'd have laughed that big laugh of his and said, 'Now there's somebody with more sand than sense.'" A sad smile. "It's what he said about me the night I turned. More sand than sense. Turned out he was the one with more sand than sense riding into a camp full of guns to save one man's soul. It got him killed." "It didn't get him killed," Evelyn said. "Mercer got him killed. There's a difference, and you know it, and you'd best keep knowing it, because a man who blames himself for another man's murder makes careless mistakes, and I did not leave my whole life behind to watch you get us both killed on account of guilt." Silas looked at her in the dark. "You're a hard woman, Evelyn Whitmore." "You keep saying that." "I keep meaning it." They rode through the night and made cold camp at dawn in a stand of cottonwoods well off the road, and they slept in shifts, and Evelyn took the first watch and sat with Samuel's revolver in her lap, watching the road they'd come down. And somewhere in the gray morning, she understood that she was happier sitting in the dirt with a gun and a hunted man asleep nearby and killers somewhere behind them than she'd been in 14 months of safety. It shamed her a little. It didn't change it. They were 3 days on the road to Abilene, and those 3 days changed everything between them, though neither of them would have been able to say exactly when or how. It was the small things. It was Silas teaching her to read the country the way an outlaw reads it, where the water was, where a man could be seen from, and where he couldn't. How to tell an honest traveler's dust from a hunting party's from a mile off. It was Evelyn teaching him things too, though she'd never have called it teaching the way she talked to the mule, the way she found comfort in small tasks, the way she'd hum under her breath while she cooked an old hymn. And one evening she caught him listening to it with his eyes closed, and a look on his face like a man hearing something he'd forgotten existed. "My mother sang that one," he said when she stopped. "Don't stop on my account." She didn't stop. She sang it soft, while the little fire burned low, and Silas Blackwood wanted in 3 states for a murder he didn't commit, sat in the dark and listened to a widow sing his mother's hymn, and something in him that had been clenched tight for 2 years let go by a fraction. It was on the second night that he told her the thing he'd never told anyone. They were sitting by the low fire, and the talk had gone quiet, and out of the quiet Silas said, "I've thought about it, turning myself in, more than once." He was looking at the fire, not at her. "I've thought some nights when the running got to be more than I could stand. I've thought about just riding into a town and giving myself up, letting them hang me and be done. At least then the running would stop." His hands tightened. "The only reason I never did it, the only reason, is that if I hang the proof stays hid, and Mercer wins, and Reed died for nothing. That's the only thing that's kept me on this earth 2 years. Not wanting to live. Just not wanting Reed to have died for nothing." Evelyn's chest went tight. She understood suddenly that the man beside her had been living without hope for so long that he'd forgotten it was a thing a person could have. That he'd been running not toward anything, but only away, kept alive by duty to a dead man and nothing else. And that this more than the guns, or the posters, or Harlan Voss was the real danger, because a man who doesn't want to live takes chances a living man wouldn't. "Listen to me," she said, and something in her voice made him look up. "When this is done, when the proof's in the marshal's hands, and your name's clear, and Mercer's answering for what he did, you're going to have to figure out how to want to live again. Because clearing your name isn't the same as having a life. And I've learned that the hard way, and I'll not watch you win everything and still lose yourself." She held his eyes. "You hear me, Silas Blackwood? You don't get to save everybody else and then throw yourself away. That's not how this ends. Not if I have any say. He looked at her for a long time across the little fire. "And do you," he said quietly, "have a say?" And Evelyn Whitmore, who had buried a husband and sealed off her heart and sworn no man would ever cross her gate again, heard herself say, "I think I'd like to, if you'd let me." Neither of them said anything else. They didn't need to. Something had been spoken that couldn't be unspoken, and they both sat with it in the firelight. Two broken people who'd each decided the other might be worth the risk of hoping. And if the fire burned a little lower and they sat a little closer, well, there was no one on the dark prairie to see it, and neither of them would have cared if there was. They reached the country around Abilene on the third day. They came at it careful the way Silas had taught her, circling wide coming in from the south, where the traffic on the roads would hide two more travelers among the rest. And it was there on the outskirts, at a crossroads trading post, where they'd stopped for water, and news that the plan Evelyn had carried in her chest for 3 days finally became real and terrifying, and hers alone to carry. "You can't come into town," she said. It wasn't a question. They both knew it. "Your face is on every wall in Kansas. You set foot in Abilene, somebody knows you inside the hour." "I know. So I go alone. The church first for the proof. Then I find out about the marshal, Kettering. Whether he's still honest, still there, still alive. And I don't hand anybody anything until I'm sure." She recited it back to him the way she'd recited it 100 times in her head. "Loose stone, north corner, cross mark, oilcloth behind it. That's it." But his face had gone tight and pale, and she understood that sending her in alone cost him more than any wound had. "Evelyn, there's a thing I have to tell you before you go, and I should have told you sooner, and I didn't, because I'm a coward about it." Her heart lurched. "What?" "Voss knows your face now, and Mercer's got men in every town in this county, including Abilene. If Voss rode to Salina, found no trail, and turned back, and if he's smart, which he is, he won't ride back to your empty ranch. He'll come here." Silas's jaw worked. Because a man like Voss, once he starts to doubt a story, he pulls the whole thing apart. And if he pulls apart the story of the widow who lied to him, he gets to wondering why a lonely widow would lie about a wounded man riding north. And the only answer that makes sense is that the wounded man never rode north at all, and then he starts wondering where a wounded man on the run might be trying to get to. Silas looked at her. And he knows Evelyn. Voss knows about the proof. He was there the night Reed died. He knows there's evidence hidden somewhere, and he knows I'd be trying to get it, and if he puts it all together, he lands on the same place we're standing. Abilene. He could already be here. He could be here before us. Evelyn absorbed it. She'd known it somewhere, but hearing it laid out plain made it real. She might walk into that town to find Harlan Voss already there waiting, and this time no lie would save her, because he'd already know the lie for what it was. "Then I'd best be quick," she said. "Evelyn." "No, don't." She took his hand there at the crossroads in the daylight where anyone might see, and she didn't care. "I know the risk. I've known it since the barn. If Voss is there, I'll see him before he sees me, because nobody looks twice at a fat widow. Remember, that's the whole reason this works. I can walk right past Harlan Voss on the street, and he'll see a woman he questioned once at a ranch and dismissed if he sees me at all. That's my armor, Silas. Everybody underestimating me. It's kept me alive this long. It'll get me through Abilene." She squeezed his hand. "You wait here. This trading post, the grove behind it. You keep out of sight, and you keep Bess ready, and you do not under any circumstances come into that town after me. If I'm not back by dark, you don't ride in to save me. You ride away and you find another road to the truth. Promise me." "I can't promise that." "You can and you will. You made me promise the same thing. I'm not braver than you. I just know that if you ride into Abilene after me, we both hang, and if you don't, one of us has a chance to see this through." She held his eyes. "Promise me, Silas. On Tom Reed's grave, the way you swore you were innocent. Promise me you won't come after me." It cost him. She watched it cost him, watched him fight it, the way he'd fought every instinct to protect her by keeping her small, and watched him lose because she was right, and he knew she was right. "I promise." he said, and his voice was rough as gravel. "On Reed's grave. But Evelyn," he caught her hand as she turned. "You come back. You hear me? Proof or no proof, Marshal or no Marshal, you come back to this grove by dark. I've spent 2 years with nothing to come back to and nothing to wait for. Don't you dare give me that and then take it away." And Evelyn Whitmore, who'd told herself all her life that she was too soft, too heavy, too lonely, too broken, looked at the hunted man holding her hand like it was the last solid thing in the world, and understood that somewhere on the long dark road she'd become the strongest person either of them knew. "I'll come back," she said. "I've got too much reason to." She climbed onto the wagon seat. She took up the reins. And she drove alone toward Abilene, toward a church with a loose stone, and a town that wanted the man she'd left behind with Samuel's revolver under the seat, and Tom Reed's proof waiting 3 miles east, and Harlan Voss, maybe already there in the crowd. And she did not look back, because she knew that if she looked back, she'd see Silas standing at the edge of the grove, watching her go. And she wasn't sure she was strong enough to keep driving if she saw it. She found the church. It was still standing just as he'd said, white paint gone gray and peeling, roof sagging door hanging on one hinge but standing. Nobody had torn it down. Nobody had burned it. It sat forgotten at the edge of the old road with the prairie grass grown up around it, and Evelyn drove the wagon into the shade behind it where it couldn't be seen from the road, and she climbed down with her heart in her throat, and she went around to the north corner. She had to get down on her knees in the dirt to find it. Low to the ground, he'd said, and he was right. She ran her fingers along the foundation stones in the shadow, feeling for the one that was loose, feeling for the mark, and for a terrible moment she found nothing, only solid stone and packed dirt, and she thought, it's gone. Somebody found it. 2 years is too long, and then her fingers found the scratch. A cross. Cut into the stone with a knife weathered now, but there unmistakable just where he'd said it would be. Her hands were shaking. She worked her fingers into the seam around the stone and pulled, and it resisted. 2 years settled into place, and she pulled harder, breaking her nails, not caring, and the stone came free with a grind of grit, and she reached into the dark hollow behind it, and her fingers closed on oilcloth. She drew it out. A bundle wrapped tight, tied with cord, gone brittle with age, and inside, when she peeled back a corner with trembling fingers to be sure, papers. Deeds. Letters. A ledger in a cramped hand. 2 years hidden, waiting the whole truth of Caleb Mercer's crimes and Silas Blackwood's innocence, bundled in oilcloth behind a stone in a forgotten church, and Evelyn Whitmore held it in her hands and felt the enormous, terrible weight of it, the weight of a dead sheriff's last request, the weight of every family. Mercer had ruined, the weight of the life of the man waiting for her in a grove 3 miles west. She wrapped it back up. She tucked it inside her dress against her body where no pickpocket and no searching hand would find it without her knowing. She set the stone back in its place. And she stood and brushed the dirt from her knees and turned to go back to the wagon. A man was standing at the corner of the church watching her. Evelyn's heart stopped. She hadn't heard him come. He was leaning against the peeling white board's arms, crossed a lawman's star on his chest, catching the light, and he was looking at her with a calm and level gaze that gave away nothing at all. "Afternoon," he said. "Didn't mean to startle you, though I confess I'm curious what a woman's doing on her knees behind an abandoned church pulling stones out of the foundation." He pushed off the wall unhurried. "Name's Kettering. Ambrose Kettering. I'm the marshal in these parts." His eyes went to the front of her dress where the bundle made its shape, and then back to her face mild as milk and twice as hard to read. "And I've got a powerful feeling, ma'am, that you and I need to have a conversation." Evelyn did not reach for the revolver in the wagon. That was the first decision, and she made it in half a heartbeat because the wagon was 10 feet away, and the man's hand rested easy near his own gun, and she'd never clear that distance alive. So she did the only thing left to her. She lifted her chin and became one more time a woman nobody took seriously. A conversation. She let her voice go breathless, put a hand to her chest like a startled old woman. "Marshal, I don't know what you think you saw, but I'm just a widow passing through, and I stopped to rest my mule and say a prayer, this being a church, or having been one, and I dropped my mother's brooch in the grass and got down to hunt for it, and—" "Ma'am." Kettering said it gently, but it stopped her cold. I've been a lawman 22 years. I've heard every story a frightened person can invent, and I want you to know, I don't hold the lying against you, because I can see plain that you're scared, and scared people lie. It's God's own truth." He tilted his head. "But you weren't hunting a brooch. You pulled a marked stone out of that foundation, you took something out of the hollow behind it, and you put the stone back neat as you found it. That's not a woman who lost a brooch. That's a woman who knew exactly what she came for and exactly where to find it." His eyes stayed level. "Now, I'm going to guess. And you tell me if I'm warm. That bundle against your dress. That wouldn't happen to have anything to do with Sheriff Tom Reed, would it?" The name landed like a blow. Evelyn's face must have moved some flicker she couldn't stop, because Kettering nodded slow, as if she'd answered him. "Thought so," he said quietly. And now Evelyn's mind was racing, because this was the exact knife edge Silas had warned her about, the moment where everything hung on one question she couldn't answer. Was this the honest Marshal Reed had trusted, or was this one of Mercer's men wearing a star? And if she guessed wrong, she handed Caleb Mercer the proof, and her life, and Silas's both. Kettering. The name was right. But 2 years was a long time, and men could be bought, and a star didn't make a man honest. And she'd promised Silas she'd trust nobody. "I don't know that name," she said. "I don't know any sheriff. I told you I'm just passing through." Kettering studied her a long moment. Then, to her surprise, he sat down. Right there on an overturned crate by the church wall, unhurried, taking the weight off, making himself smaller, less of a threat. And she understood he was doing it on purpose, the way she made herself harmless only backwards. "Let me tell you a story," he said, "and you can decide what to do with it. 2 years back, a good man died. Sheriff over the next county, name of Tom Reed. Best lawman I ever knew, and I've known a few. Found shot dead in his own house." Kettering's jaw tightened. Story that went around was that an outlaw named Silas Blackwood killed him. There were posters up by morning, witnesses who swore to it. Real tidy. "And I never believed one word of it, ma'am, and I'll tell you why. Because 2 weeks before he died, Tom Reed rode all the way to Abilene to see me. And he sat in my office, and he told me he was building a case against Caleb Mercer that would hang him. And he told me the case was almost ready. And he told me if anything happened to him, I should look to Mercer and not believe a thing the man's tame lawman said." Kettering looked up at her. "And then he was dead, and the whole thing got wrapped up neat and blamed on a drifter, and every scrap of evidence Tom Reed ever collected vanished into thin air. 2 years ago." He nodded at the bundle against her dress. "And now a frightened widow's digging something out of a church 3 miles from where Tom Reed used to preach on Sundays before they built the new one in town. So you'll forgive me, ma'am, if I don't quite believe you're just passing through." Evelyn's heart was pounding. Everything he said fit. Everything he said was exactly what an honest marshal who'd trusted Reed would say. But that was the trouble, wasn't it? Because a clever enemy would know to say exactly, that would know the story well enough to bait the hook with it, and she had no way to tell truth from trap. And Silas's voice was in her head saying, "Trust nobody." And Tom Reed's proof was against her ribs, and this man was between her and the wagon. "Even if that were true," she said carefully, "even if I had something, how would I know you're who you say A-star's easy to pin on? Reed trusted a marshal named Kettering. Maybe you're Kettering. Maybe you're the man who took his badge off his body." She held his gaze. "Mercer's got lawmen in his pocket. Everyone knows that. You just said it yourself. So how does a body know which lawmen?" Something changed in Kettering's face. Not anger. Respect, maybe. He nodded slowly. "That's a smart question," he said. "That's the smartest question you could ask, and the fact that you asked it tells me somebody taught you to ask it, somebody who knows how deep Mercer's rot goes." He leaned forward. "You want proof I'm honest. I can't give you proof. That's the hell of it. An honest man and a bought man look exactly the same until the moment they don't. So I'll tell you what I can tell you, and you weigh it." He held up one finger. 1. If I were Mercer's man, I wouldn't be talking. I'd have taken that bundle off you the second I saw its shape, and you'd be dead in the grass behind this church, and nobody would ever know. I've had a clear shot at you for 5 minutes. You're still breathing. A second finger. 2. Mercer doesn't know that proof still exists. He spent 2 years hunting Silas Blackwood because Blackwood's the only one who knows where it is. If I were Mercer's, and I'd just watched you dig it up, Mercer would already be riding here, and I'd be keeping you talking till he arrived. Instead, I'm sitting on a crate by myself. He lowered his hand. And 3. Tom Reed was my friend. And I have spent 2 years knowing the man who killed him is walking free with a badge, and knowing there was proof somewhere that could set it right, and not being able to find it. So if you've got what I think you've got, ma'am, then you are the answer to 2 years of prayer. And I am asking you, not ordering you, asking you to trust me long enough to hear the rest. Evelyn stood frozen, the bundle burning against her ribs, and she thought about the 2 things she could do. She could run, try for the wagon, try for the revolver, and probably die. Or she could gamble one more time on reading a man's face for the truth, the same skill that had told her Silas wasn't lying in the barn loft. She looked at Ambrose Kettering. She looked hard, and she saw a tired man with grief worn deep into the lines of his face, a man who'd said Tom Reed was my friend in a voice that couldn't be counterfeited, and she made her choice. His name isn't Silas Blackwood anymore, she said. He goes by Nathan Cole now, and he didn't kill your friend. He was there when Reed died. Reed put this in his hands and told him to bring it to a marshal named Kettering in Abilene, and he spent 2 years running because Mercer's men have been hunting him across 3 states, and he couldn't get near this town without hanging, so he sent me. She lifted her chin. I'm the one nobody looks twice at. That's the whole plan. A widow nobody suspects fetching a dead man's evidence out of a church. Kettering was very still. Blackwood's alive. Alive. Half-healed from a bullet. Mercer's men put in him a couple weeks back, but alive. And he's here, near here. And Evelyn caught herself because she'd almost said it, almost told this stranger where Silas was waiting, and she stopped, and she saw Kettering see her stop, and she said, He's somewhere safe. That's all I'll say. I trust you enough to hand you the proof, Marshal, if you'll take it and use it. I don't trust you enough yet to hand you the man. Not till I see what you do with this. Kettering looked at her for a long moment, and then remarkably, he smiled. A tired, sad, genuine smile. You're careful, he said. Reed would have liked you. And it was so close to what Silas had said, word for word almost, that it went through Evelyn like a chill, and she thought they're all saying the same thing. Reed would have liked her, and she understood that this dead man she'd never met had become the compass they were all steering by, honest men and outlaws alike, and that maybe that was how you knew the truth of a thing, when the honest and the guilty both bent their lives around the same dead man's memory. All right, Kettering said. Here's where we stand, and I'll be straight with you because you've earned straight. That bundle is the most dangerous thing in the state of Kansas right now. The minute Mercer learns it exists, he'll burn this whole county down to get it back, and he'll kill you and me and Blackwood and anybody who ever touched it. So we can't go loud. We can't ride up to the county courthouse and lay it on the judge's desk, because half the courthouse is Mercer's and the judge is the other half. He stood, joints cracking. There's a circuit judge. Honest one, a man named Aldous Prine, rides through the territory hearing cases the local courts can't be trusted with. He's due in Abilene in 4 days. He's the one man in 500 miles who can look at this proof and act on it, and not be bought or scared off it. Kettering's eyes were hard. 4 days. We keep this hidden. 4 days, keep you and Blackwood alive, 4 days. And when Prine rides in, we lay it all before him at once, the evidence and the living witness both, and we finish what Tom Reed started. That's the play. That's the only play. You follow me. 4 days. Evelyn's stomach sank. 4 days was a long time to keep breathing in a county full of Mercer's men. You're sure about this, Judge? Nothing sure, but Prine's the closest to sure there is. He nodded at the wagon. Now, you're going to want to get off this road. 2 people looking at a church too long draws eyes, and there are eyes everywhere in this country that report to Mercer. I've got a place, a line shack out on my own land north of here, off any road anybody travels. Nobody goes there but me. You bring Blackwood, you both hole up there 4 days. I bring you food and word, And when Prine comes, we move." He paused. "But you'll have to tell me where Blackwood is and go get him, because I'm not letting that man ride loose across this county with his face on every wall 4 days from finishing this. One bad piece of luck, and it's all over." And there it was. The very thing she'd sworn to Silas she wouldn't do. Tell someone where he was. Hand over the man. She'd promised. She'd promised to trust nobody with Silas himself. Only the proof. And here was Kettering asking for exactly that. And every word he'd said made sense. And it made too much sense. And the part of her that had learned caution in a hard country whispered that a trap always makes sense. That's what makes it a trap. "No," she said. Kettering blinked. "No. I'll take the proof to your line shack. I'll wait there 4 days. But I fetch Silas myself, and I bring him myself. And you don't follow me, and you don't set a man to watch me go. Because if I lead you to him, and I'm wrong about you, then I've killed him, and I'd sooner die than do that." She squared her shoulders. "You want me to trust you, Marshal? Fine. I'll trust you with the papers and my own life. That's a lot. But I don't trust you with his, not yet. And if that's not good enough for you, then you'll have to shoot me for these papers, because it's the best I've got." For a long moment Kettering said nothing. Then he laughed quiet and shook his head. "Reed would have liked you," he said again. "All right, widow, have it your way. You fetch him. I won't follow. I won't watch. I'll draw you a map to the shack, and I'll trust you to come same as you're trusting me, to keep my mouth shut about all this for 4 days. He pulled a stub of pencil and a scrap of paper from his vest and began to draw. "But hear me. Whatever road you take to fetch him, you take it careful, and you get to that shack before dark, and you don't light a fire the first night. Voss is in town." Evelyn's blood turned to ice. "Voss is here." Kettering looked up sharp. "You know that name." "I know it." Her mind was racing, spinning back to the crossroads, to Silas's warning. He could be here before us, and she'd thought it a caution, and here it was a fact. Harlan Voss. Big man, dead eyes, smiles like a snake. He came to my ranch 4 nights back hunting Silas. I lied him off my land, sent him toward Salina, and Silas said he'd figure the lie and come here and... She grabbed at the crate for balance. "He's here. He's already here. How long?" "Rode in yesterday. Him and 3 others put up at the hotel been asking questions all over town. Quiet questions. About strangers. About anybody wounded. About anybody asking after old business." Kettering's face was grim. "I didn't know what he was hunting till just now. Now I do. He's hunting the same thing I'm sitting here holding a conversation about. He's a day ahead of where I thought this stood, and that changes the arithmetic considerable." Everything in Evelyn screamed to run, to get to the wagon, to get to Silas, to get gone. She forced it down. "Then I have to get to Silas before Voss thinks to look wherever Silas is." "Where is he?" "South. A ways south off the Abilene Road." She wouldn't give the crossroads by name, not even now. "He's waiting for me. If I'm not back by dark, he's supposed to ride off and find another way. He promised me that." "Then you'd best not be late," Kettering said, and pressed the map into her hand. "Because if Voss has any sense, and he does, he's already worked out that a wounded man trying to reach Abilene wouldn't come straight in. He'd hole up outside and send somebody ahead. Somebody nobody suspects." His eyes met hers, and the meaning was plain. "Somebody like a widow. You understand me. The very thing that makes you safe. Voss will eventually think of because he thought of it about you once already at your ranch and let it go. He won't let it go twice. You are not as invisible as you were yesterday. Get your man and get to that shack and stay out of this town." Evelyn was already moving. She climbed onto the wagon seat, the proof against her ribs, the map crushed in her fist, and she took up the reins, and Kettering caught the wagon's side rail and looked up at her one last time. "What's your name?" he asked. "I've told you mine. Feels wrong not to know the name of the woman finishing Tom Reed's work. Evelyn." She gathered the reins. "Evelyn Whitmore. Evelyn Whitmore." He stepped back. "You get your man, and you keep him breathing 4 days, and you'll have done more for justice in this county than every star-wearing man in it managed in 2 years, myself included. Go on now. Go." She went. She drove faster than was wise, faster than was safe. The wagon jolting over the rough ground, the mule laboring, and every mile her heart hammered a single word. Hurry, hurry, hurry. Because Voss was in Abilene a full day before she'd feared. And any moment his snake's mind might land on the same plan Silas had built. Might send men south along the roads looking for a wounded man holed up outside of town, might already have done it. She'd left Silas at a crossroads trading post with instructions to hide. But a crossroads was a public place. Travelers coming and going, and if Voss had put out word, if he'd offered money, somebody might have seen a man on a gray horse, somebody might talk. The sun was dropping when she came in sight of the grove behind the trading post, and her chest seized, because she didn't see him. She didn't see Bess. She didn't see Silas. The grove looked empty, and for one horrible plunging moment, she thought he's gone. They got him, or he thought I was dead, and rode off like I made him promise. And then a shadow moved among the cottonwoods, and Silas stepped out with his hand near his gun, and his whole body coiled tight. And when he saw it was her, saw her face, the coil went out of him all at once, and he crossed to the wagon so fast he forgot to favor his side. "You're back." He gripped the wagon rail, looking up at her, searching her face. "You're back. You're alive. I've been standing in these trees for hours telling myself the light was still good. That dark hadn't come, that I wasn't going to have to keep that promise and ride off without you." He stopped. His eyes dropped to the front of her dress, to the shape there. "You got it. I got it." She was breathless from the drive, from the fear, from the relief of his face. "Silas, we have to go right now. There's no time. I'll tell you everything on the road, but we have to move. Voss is in Abilene." He went still. "You saw him?" "No, but the marshal did. Kettering, he's real Silas. He's honest, or I've bet everything we've got that he is, and he says, Voss rode into Abilene yesterday with 3 men, and he's been asking questions all over town about strangers, about wounded men. And Kettering says it's only a matter of time before Voss thinks of exactly what we did. A wounded man holing up outside town and sending someone ahead and—" She reached down and gripped his hand. "Get on the wagon, or get on Bess and follow. I'll explain everything, but we cannot be here. This is a public crossroads. If Voss put out word, somebody could have seen you." Silas was already moving, but his face had gone tight with a new fear. "Kettering! You found Kettering! You told him about me!" "I told him you're alive and innocent, and that you sent me. I did not tell him where you were. I wouldn't. I kept that promise." She squeezed his hand hard. "He wanted to come fetch you himself, and I told him no. I fetch you alone. He doesn't follow. He doesn't watch." He agreed. He gave me a map to a line shack on his own land, where we can hide 4 days until an honest circuit judge comes through a man named Prine, the one man who can take the proof and act on it. 4 days, Silas. 4 days, and this is over. 4 days. Silas's jaw worked. 4 days in one place with Voss in the county and Mercer not yet knowing the proof exists. That's a long time to stay lucky. I know it is. But it's the play. It's the only play Kettering could see, and I couldn't see a better one, and I've been trusting my gut this whole way, and my gut says the marshal's honest and the plan's sound. She pulled at his hand. "Please, get on the wagon. We can argue on the road. We can't argue here." He went. He tied Bess to the wagon's back and climbed up beside her, and she handed him the map and took up the reins and got them moving north and east, away from the crossroads, toward the line of hills where Kettering's shack waited, and as they rolled, she told him all of it. Every word of the churchyard. Kettering's 3 reasons. The judge the 4 days, and Silas listened without interrupting his lawman's stillness on him, weighing it, testing it for the crack. "He let you keep the proof," he said finally. "That's the thing I keep coming back to. If he were Mercer's, he'd never have let you drive off with it. You said he had a clear shot at you for 5 minutes and never took it. That's what he said. And it was true. He could have taken it. He could have killed me behind that church and nobody would ever have known. And instead he sat down on a crate and told me about his dead friend." She glanced at him. "I read his face, Silas. Same as I read yours in the loft. I could be wrong, but I don't think I'm wrong. Silas was quiet a moment. You read mine right. I know I did. Then I'll trust you read his right too. He let out a breath. God help me. 2 years I've trusted nobody but a dead man and a horse, and now I'm trusting a widow's reed on a marshal's face. But you've been right about everything, Evelyn. Every gamble you've made since the barn has come up true. So we go to the shack. We wait for Prine, and we pray Voss doesn't get lucky. They didn't get to pray long. They'd gone perhaps 4 miles, the light going gold and long, when Bess balked at the back of the wagon, throwing her head, and Silas twisted around and went rigid. Riders, he said low, behind us, coming up the road we came. Evelyn's heart slammed. How many? 2. Coming fast. He was already down off the seat into the wagon bed, pulling the blanket over the shape of the proof, checking his pistol. Keep driving. Normal pace. Don't speed up, don't slow down. 2 riders on a road means nothing could be anybody. But get that revolver up on the seat under the flour sack where you can reach it, and if it goes bad, you drive that mule off the road into the brush, and you run, and you don't look back for me. You've got the proof. You've got the marshal. You don't need me. Promise. Stop saying that. Her voice cracked. Stop telling me I don't need you. I'm sick to death of it. Get down and stay hid, and let me handle whoever's coming, same as I handled Voss, and stop planning your own death every time trouble shows. He stopped. He got down flat under the blanket beside the proof pistol ready, and Evelyn drove on at a steady pace with Samuel's revolver under the flour sack an inch from her right hand, and she listened to the hoofbeats come up behind. Closer. Closer, and then a voice called out, "Hey, hey, hold up there!" She didn't stop. She half-turned, made her face tired and wary, a lone woman with a wagon. 2 riders came up alongside young men, hard-looking but young, and one of them had a hand resting on his gun, and the other was doing the talking. And neither of them was Voss, and neither of them wore a badge. "Evening, ma'am." The talker looked her over, looked over the wagon, the mule, the tied-on gray horse at the back, and something sharpened in his eyes when he saw Bess. "That's a fine gray you got there. Where'd you come by her?" And Evelyn understood in a cold rush exactly what was happening. These were Voss's men, or Mercer's riders, put out on the roads with a description, and the description was of a gray horse because everyone who'd ever chased Silas Blackwood knew he rode a gray roan, and here she was towing Bess plain as day behind her wagon, and her stomach dropped through the wagon bed. The gray, she kept her voice flat, bored an old woman's voice, belonged to my husband, God rest him. He's not been dead a year and I can't hardly stand to look at the animal, but I can't afford to let a good horse go either, so I drag her along and cry about it. She let her voice waver. Why? You wanting to buy her, I might sell. Lord knows I could use the money more than the memories. The 2 riders exchanged a look. The talker's eyes came back to her narrower now. Your husband's horse. And your husband died when less than a year back? 10 months. The fever took him. Evelyn dabbed at her eye. Why are you asking me about my dead husband's horse, young man? What's this about? It's about a man we're hunting, the talker said, and his voice had lost all its friendliness. Rides a gray roan, wounded. And here's a gray roan on the back of a widow's wagon, and the widow's awful quick with an answer about it. His hand tightened on his gun. We're going to need to look in that wagon, ma'am. And there it was, the same demand Voss had made at her ranch. The same knife edge. Only now there was no lie big enough, because Silas was under the blanket 6 feet away, and if they looked, they'd find him, and this time there were only 2 of them. But 2 was enough to kill her, and take the proof, and end everything. Her right hand drifted toward the flour sack. Look in my wagon. She let anger come, real anger, the old armor. I've got flour and blankets and a widow's traveling things, and if you 2 think you're going to paw through a lone woman's belongings on a public road at sundown, get down off the wagon, the talker said, all pretense gone. Now, hands where I can see them. And Evelyn's hand closed on the revolver under the flour sack, and she knew cold and clear that she was about to have to shoot a man or die, and she'd never shot a man in her life. And her whole soul recoiled from it, even as her hand tightened, and in that frozen instant, the talker started to swing down off his horse toward her, and the blanket in the wagon bed exploded upward. Silas came up out of the wagon like something loosed from a trap, and his pistol was already speaking, and the talker was flung backward off his horse before his boot ever touched the ground, and the second rider clawed for his gun and got it half out before Silas's second shot took him and spun him from the saddle. And it was over. It was over in less time than it took Evelyn's heart to beat twice. 2 men down in the road, and their horses bolting, and the echoes rolling away across the empty country. And Silas standing in the wagon bed with his pistol smoking and his face gone terrible and old, and, for a moment, neither of them could speak. "Are you hit?" Silas got to her hands on her shoulders, her arms, her face checking. "Evelyn, are you hit? Did they touch you?" I'm fine." She was shaking so hard she could barely hold the reins. "You killed them, Silas. You killed them right there in the road. They were going to kill you." His voice was raw. "They were going to search that wagon and find me and the proof. And they'd have killed you and taken it, and I couldn't. I couldn't let that happen. I told you, I never killed a man in all my outlaw years, and I meant it. And I'd have gone another 2 years. Not killing a man, but not that. Not you. I wasn't going to stand under a blanket and listen to them." He broke off, breathing hard. "I'm sorry, God. I'm sorry you had to see that." And Evelyn, shaking, terrified, looked at the 2 dead men in the road, and then at the living man in front of her, who had just broken the one clean thing he'd carried out of his whole dark past, killed for the first time in his life and killed to save her. And she understood the weight of what he'd just spent. And she reached up and took his face in both her trembling hands. "You saved my life," she said. "Whatever it cost you, you saved my life, and I'm not going to let you carry it as a sin. You hear me? You didn't murder anybody. You saved me. That's what happened here. That's the only thing that happened here." He shut his eyes, and his forehead came down against hers, and for a moment they just stood like that in the wagon with 2 dead men cooling in the road, holding each other up. Then Silas straightened, and the lawman's cold came back over him because it had to. "We can't leave them here. Somebody rides this road, finds 2 of Mercer's men shot dead, and the whole county comes down on this country looking. And their horses are gone, run off, which means when they don't come back, Voss knows he lost 2 men on this road. And Voss is smart enough to draw the line from here to us." He was already climbing down, moving fast, despite his side. "Help me get them off the road, into the brush. Buy us what time we can. And then we ride hard for that shack because the arithmetic just changed again, and not in our favor." They dragged the 2 men into the deep brush off the road, and it was grim, ugly work, and Evelyn's hands shook the whole while, and she was sick once quietly off to the side, and Silas didn't say anything about it, just steadied her and kept working. When it was done, when the road looked empty again and the light was nearly gone, they climbed back onto the wagon and drove on faster now into the falling dark toward the hills and the shack, and neither of them spoke for a long time. It was full dark when they found it. Kettering's line shack tucked in a fold of the hills off any road exactly where the map set a low, dark shape with a lean-to for the animals, and they got the wagon behind it out of sight, and got Bess and the mule under the lean-to, and got themselves inside, and only then in the dark, with the door barred, did Evelyn let herself fall apart. She sat down on the edge of the rough bunk, and she shook, and the tears came all of it at once. The churchyard and Kettering, and the ride and the 2 men in the road, and Silas coming up out of the blanket firing all of it. And Silas sat down beside her in the dark, and put his arm around her, careful, uncertain, like a man who'd forgotten how. And she turned into him and cried against his chest, and he held her, and neither of them said a word. When the worst of it passed, she stayed there, her cheek against him, listening to his heart. "I killed 2 men today," she said quietly. "I didn't pull the trigger, but I brought them to that road. If I hadn't been towing Bess—" "Don't!" His arm tightened. "Don't you dare pick up that particular stone, Evelyn Whitmore, because I have carried it 2 years, and it is heavier than you know, and I will not watch you shoulder it. You didn't kill anybody." Mercer killed those men years back when he made them into the kind of animals who'd search a widow's wagon and shoot her for what's in it. You just drove a wagon. I did what I did. And I'd do it again 10 times over, every one of them, before I'd let a hair on your head come to harm. He pressed his lips to the top of her head, and she felt him do it, and neither of them pretended it was nothing. You've spent this whole road telling me I don't get to throw myself away. Well, it cuts both ways. You don't get to carry my sins for me. I've got enough and they're mine, and I'll thank you to leave them be. She almost laughed through the tears. You're a hard man, Silas Blackwood. The country made me hard, he said, and she felt him almost smile against her hair. You'd best hope it made me hard enough. They sat in the dark, and outside the wind worked at the shack, and somewhere out in the black country, Harlan Voss was waiting on 2 men who would never come back, and 4 days stood between them and a judge, and the proof lay wrapped in oilcloth on the rough table, an arm's length away. And Evelyn Whitmore, in the dark, in the arms of a hunted man, understood that she had never in her life been in so much danger, and had never, not once, not even in the good years with Samuel, felt so completely, terrifyingly alive. 4 days, she whispered. 4 days, he answered. We'll make it 4 days. And out in the dark, faint, so faint she almost thought she'd imagined it from the direction of the road they'd come. A single horse whickered, and Silas went rigid against her, and his hand found his pistol in the dark, and every hope in the little shack turned to ice. Silas was on his feet before the second wicker came moving through the dark shack without a sound, and he put his back to the wall beside the door and eased the bar up and cracked it open an inch, pistol ready. And Evelyn crouched by the bunk with Samuel's revolver in both shaking hands, aimed at the door at whatever was coming. Nothing came. A long minute passed, then another, the wind and the animals under the lean-to, and farther off that single horse. One rider, Silas breathed. Just one. Sitting still out there 100 yards, maybe more. If it were Voss with men, they'd have come already. One man alone doesn't rush a shack in the dark. He's waiting for light, or he's waiting for us to spook and run. He eased the door shut. Or it's Kettering. Kettering said he wouldn't follow. Men say a lot of things. But even as he said it, Silas's voice had doubt in it, because the whole plan rested on Kettering keeping his word. And if Kettering had broken it, if he'd followed her after all, then everything she'd read in his face was wrong, and they were finished. Stay down. Stay quiet. We wait him out. Come light, we'll know. They waited. They waited in the dark for what felt like half the night, taking turns at the door. Neither of them sleeping, and the single horse stayed out there patient. And no attack came, and slowly, Evelyn's hammering heart came down to something she could live with. It was near dawn, the black going gray at the door's edge, when a voice called out across the dark, low and careful and unmistakable. Blackwood, Whitmore, it's Kettering. I'm coming in slow, hands empty, and I'd take it kindly if the 2 of you didn't shoot me. Evelyn's breath went out of her in a rush. Silas didn't lower his gun. You said you wouldn't follow, Silas called back. I didn't follow her. Kettering's voice came nearer, unhurried. I gave her a map to my own line shack. I don't need to follow a body to a place I own and drew the directions to. I let her get well ahead, made sure nobody was on her, and came in behind clean. There's a difference between following and knowing where a person's headed, and I figured you, of all men, would appreciate it. A pause. Now I'm going to open this door, and I've got food and news, and neither one's good enough to be worth shooting me over. That all right with you, Blackwood? Silas looked at Evelyn in the gray light. She nodded once. He lowered the pistol, but only halfway. Come in slow, he said. The door opened and Ambrose Kettering stepped through, hands out and empty a sack of provisions over one shoulder, and he stopped just inside and let the 2 of them look at him. Let Silas study his face, the way Evelyn had studied it in the churchyard. For a long moment, the 2 men measured each other, the outlaw and the lawman, and something passed between them, some recognition, and then Kettering set the sack down on the table beside the oilcloth bundle and let out a breath. So you're Silas Blackwood, he said. 2 years I've been trying to prove you didn't kill my friend, and here you are in my line shack looking like death warmed twice. He shook his head slowly. Tom said you had something in you worth saving. I confess there were days I doubted him. Looking at you now, I think maybe he was right. Silas's jaw worked. You knew Reed. I knew him better than most. Rode together years back before either of us pinned on a star. He was the best man I ever knew, and Mercer's men gunned him down in his own house and hung it on you, and I have been eating that for 2 years. Kettering's eyes went hard. So no Blackwood, I didn't follow the widow to trap you. I came because that bundle on the table and the man standing in front of me are the 2 things that can finally set it right, and I aim to see it done. Now sit down, the both of you, and let me tell you how much worse it got overnight. They sat. Kettering pulled out bread and dried meat and passed it around, and neither of them touched it, and he didn't either. 2 of Mercer's riders didn't come back to town last night, he said. Voss put men out on all the roads yesterday afternoon, once he'd worked the town dry of answers. Pairs of them watching the ways in and out. He looked at Silas. 2 of those men, the pair that took the south road, never reported back. Their horses came in this morning, saddles empty, one of them with blood on the leather. His eyes moved between them. You want to tell me about that, or should I guess? Silence in the shack. Then Evelyn said quietly, They stopped us on the road. They saw Bess the Gray. They knew Silas rode a gray. They were going to search the wagon. And Silas was in the wagon under a blanket with the proof, and they'd have found him and killed me and taken it, and... Her voice caught. He came up shooting. Both of them. We put them in the brush off the road. That's why their horses came home empty. Kettering closed his eyes a moment. 2 of Voss's men dead. That's bad, but it's not the worst of it. The worst of it is what it tells Voss. He leaned forward. A widow and an empty gray horse and 2 dead men on the south road. Voss isn't a fool. By now, he's stood over the arithmetic, same as I have, and it comes out to exactly one answer. The wounded man he's hunting is here near Abilene, and he's got help, and the help is a woman on a wagon with a gray roan. His eyes went to Evelyn, the very woman who lied him off her ranch 4 nights back and sent him to Salina. He'll have made that connection by now. He'll know your face, your wagon, your horse. You are the most hunted woman in Kansas, as of this morning. Evelyn Whitmore, and there is no more hiding in plain sight, because Harlan Voss is looking specifically for you. The words landed hard. Evelyn felt them land. The armor she'd worn the whole way, nobody looks twice at a widow, was gone, stripped off her by 2 dead men on a road, and she was naked to it now. Then the 4 days won't hold, Silas said flatly. Voss won't wait for a judge to ride in. He'll turn over every stone in this county looking for her for us, and a line shack on your land is a stone he'll turn. Maybe. Kettering rubbed his jaw. This place is well hid, and it's mine, and Voss has no reason yet to think of it. But you're right. We can't count on 4 quiet days anymore. The arithmetic's too tight. He was quiet a moment, thinking. There may be a way to speed it up. Judge Prine's due in 4 days, but he's not 4 days away. He's riding the circuit, and I know his route. If I ride out to meet him, ride hard, I might reach him in a day and a half too, and bring him in early. Get him to Abilene ahead of schedule, quiet, before Voss knows a judge is even coming. We lay the proof and the witness before him fast before Mercer can move. And leave us here alone 2 days while you ride for the judge, Silas said, with Voss tightening the noose. You got a better idea, I'm listening. Silas didn't answer right away, and Evelyn watched him think, watched the old outlaw calculation move behind his eyes, and she knew before he spoke that she wasn't going to like it. There's a faster way, Silas said. And a surer one. Voss isn't hunting a judge. He isn't hunting proof because he doesn't know for certain it still exists. He's hunting me. Silas Blackwood. He set his jaw. So you give him me. You ride into Abilene Marshal, and you let it be known you've caught Silas Blackwood, the man who killed Sheriff Reed, and you've got him locked in your jail awaiting the circuit judge. Voss comes running. All of Mercer's attention comes running to the jail, to me, away from her, away from the proof. And while every gun in the county's watching your jailhouse, Evelyn rides clear with the evidence and gets it to Prine herself or to another honest court. And I stand trial, and the proof clears me at the same time it hangs Mercer. No? Evelyn was on her feet. No, absolutely not. You'll do no such thing. It's the surest play. Silas didn't look at her. It draws every gun onto me and off of you. It gets the proof clear. It ends the running. It ends with you in a cell that Mercer's men can reach. Her voice cracked. You just said it. Half the courthouse is Mercer's. The local law is Mercer's. You put yourself in an Abilene jail cell, and you think you'll live to see any judge Mercer will have you shot trying to escape, or hung by a mob, or knifed in the night before Prine ever rides in, and you know it. And don't you sit there and pretend you don't? She was shaking. This isn't a plan. This is you throwing yourself away again, the same thing you've been trying to do since the barn. And I told you you don't get to do that. You don't get to save everybody and pitch yourself off the cliff. Silas finally looked at her, and his face was terrible and gentle. Evelyn, if it saves you, it doesn't save me. The words tore out of her. Do you understand nothing? It doesn't save me to live in a world where you handed yourself to the men who want you dead so that I could go on breathing without you in it. That's not saving me. That's the opposite of saving me. That's taking the one... She stopped, her chest heaving, and the rest of it came out quieter and worse. That's taking the one thing I've found worth living for and throwing it in a jail cell for Mercer to kill. I won't. I won't do it. Find another way. The shack was silent. Kettering was looking very carefully at the table, giving them what privacy a one-room shack allowed. Silas was looking at Evelyn like a man who'd just heard something he'd been afraid to hope for and afraid to want, and for a moment the plan and the danger and the whole grim arithmetic fell away, and there was just the two of them in the gray dawn. You mean that, he said quietly. I have never meant anything more in my life. He reached out and took her hand there in front of the marshal, and he held it. And something passed over his face, some breaking open, some surrender different from all the times he'd surrendered before. All right, he said. All right, no jail, no throwing myself away. We find another road. He looked at Kettering. Marshal, what if we don't split the bait from the proof at all? What if the reason your plan and my plan both scare me is that they both put the proof or the person in one place, and the guns in another, and out here apart is where people die? He was thinking fast now, the outlaw mind turning to keeping people alive instead of running. We stay together, all of us. You don't ride for Prine alone and leave us, and I don't sit in a cell alone. We move as one tonight under dark, and we ride to meet Prine together, the proof, the witness, and an honest marshal all in one party, and we don't stop till we've put it in the judge's hands. Voss can't hit what he can't find, and if we're moving through the dark cross-country, instead of sitting in a shack, he might think to search we're a harder thing to catch. Kettering considered it, turning it over. 3 of us and a wagon moving cross-country at night toward a judge whose exact position on the circuit I can only guess at. It's rough, but it keeps us together, and you're right that together's safer than split. He nodded slowly. It could work. It's got a better feel to it than leaving anybody alone. He stood. But if we're doing it, we do it right. We rest today hidden, we sleep in turns because none of us has slept, and we move the second it's full dark tonight. And we pray Voss spends today searching the town and the roads, and doesn't think to search the hills till we're long gone. It was a plan. Not a good one, but a plan they could all stand behind, and for the first time since the wicker in the dark, Evelyn felt the knot in her chest ease a fraction. They ate finally the bread and dried meat, and they took turns at watch, and they slept in the day, the way hunted things sleep, shallow and ready, and the day passed slow and quiet, and no riders came over the hills, and the arithmetic for a few hours held. It fell apart at dusk. Evelyn had the watch. She sat by the cracked door with the revolver in her lap while Silas slept, and Kettering dozed against the far wall, and she watched the light go long and gold and then gray, and she was thinking about the night they'd moved, tracing the road in her mind when she saw it. A rider on the ridge to the east, dark against the fading sky, sitting still, watching. Her blood went cold. "Silas." She said it low and sharp. "Silas, marshal up. There's a rider on the ridge." Both men were awake and moving in an instant. Silas came to the door, swore softly under his breath. Kettering looked over his shoulder, and his face went grim. "One man," Silas breathed. "Watching. Not coming in. Just watching." "Scout," Kettering said. "Voss put scouts on the high ground. He's searching the hills after all quicker than I hoped. That man's seen the shack, seen the lean-to, seen the animals." His jaw tightened. "He's not attacking because he's counting us and marking the place. He'll ride back to Voss with it, and Voss'll come with everything he's got. We've got maybe an hour before that scout reaches wherever Voss is, and however long it takes Voss to ride hereafter." "Then we move now," Silas said. "Not full dark. Now while the scout's still watching and hasn't ridden yet. We move now, and we move fast, and we're gone before he brings Voss down on this place. He'll see us go. Let him see us go. Better he sees an empty shack and a wagon running than we sit here and let Voss ring us in." Silas was already gathering the provisions, the proof moving fast despite his side. "Marshal, you know this country in the dark. You lead. Evelyn drives the wagon, I ride Bess and cover the back. We go, and we don't stop, and we lose that scout in the dark, and we ride for Prine. Come on, there's no time." They flew. They got Bess and the mule out from under the lean-to, and the proof into the wagon, and themselves onto the road, and the scout on the ridge saw them, and wheeled his horse, and vanished east at a gallop, gone to fetch Voss. And now it was a race, a flat-out race, across the dark country, between a wagon and a wounded man and a lawman on one side, and Harlan Voss and every gun Mercer owned on the other. Kettering led them off the roads entirely down draws and along creek bottoms and over ground that only a man who'd hunted this country for 20 years could have found in the failing light. And Evelyn drove the mule harder than she'd ever driven an animal. The wagon jolting and bouncing, the proof clutched to the seat beside her, and Silas rode close behind on Bess with his pistol drawn and his eyes on their back trail, and the dark came down, and still they ran. For an hour they thought they'd made it. For an hour there was nothing behind them but empty dark, and Kettering pushed them east and north through country. Evelyn couldn't have named, and she began foolishly to hope. Then Silas dropped back and dropped back further, listening, and when he came up alongside the wagon, his face in the last gray light was hard. "Riders behind us," he said. "A lot of them. Coming fast. That scout found Voss quicker than we figured." He looked at Kettering. "How far to any place we can make a stand, because they're gaining, and a wagon can't outrun horsemen, and out in the open, they'll ride us down and cut us to pieces." Kettering's face was grim as he scanned the dark country ahead. "There's a place, half a mile on. Old stone spring house built into a hillside, thick walls, one door, one window. A man could hold it. 3 men could hold it a good while." He pushed his horse harder. "It's the only cover for miles. We make for it, and we ford up, and we pray we can hold till dawn, because they won't rush stone walls in the dark. They'll wait for light, and light's a long way off. And by light, they'll have us surrounded and outnumbered, and it ends the same way," Silas said flatly, just slower. "You got a better idea, now's the time." Silas was quiet a beat, riding hard, thinking. And then he said the thing Evelyn had been dreading, the thing she'd stopped him from saying in the shack, only worse, now, only real now. "One of us takes the proof and rides on while the other 2 hold the spring house." He said it fast before she could stop him. "Voss doesn't know about the proof for certain. He's hunting me. If 2 guns ford up in that spring house and put up a fight, Voss will believe he's cornered Silas Blackwood, and he'll pour everything into taking it. And while he does, one rider slips out the far side in the dark with the evidence, and gets clear, and gets it to Prine." He turned to Kettering. "You take Evelyn and the proof. You ride for the judge. I hold the spring house alone. One man behind stone walls in the dark can fire from the window and make them believe there's 3 men in there for hours. Long enough for you 2 to get gone. Long enough to finish it. No." Evelyn hauled back on the reins, the wagon lurching. "No, We are not doing this. We are not. I told you. Evelyn, there's no time to argue. Then don't argue. Listen. She was screaming it now over the pound of hooves behind them growing louder. You do this and you die. One man alone in a stone box against Voss, and a dozen guns you hold till dawn maybe, and then they burn you out, or starve you out, or rush you, and you die. And I ride away, knowing I left you to it, and I told you in that shack. I told you that's not saving me, that's killing the only... Her voice broke clean apart. I won't leave you. Do you hear me? I did not dig a bullet out of you and lie to Voss and put 2 men in the ground and cross this whole county to leave you to die in a stone hut half a mile from a judge. I won't. I'd sooner die beside you. I mean that. I would rather die in that spring house beside you than live to be 100 having ridden away. The wagon had stopped. The hoofbeats behind them were louder closer, and Kettering was looking back into the dark, and his hand was on his gun, and Silas swung down off Bess, and came to the wagon and took Evelyn's face in both his hands, and there was no time. There was no time at all, and he said it anyway. I love you. He said it plain the way he said everything, no dressing on it. I have loved you since you pulled that shotgun down an inch in your own yard, because I stopped my horse from foundering. I didn't have the right to say it, a hunted man with a rope waiting. I didn't have the right to ask you to love me back, and I'm only saying it now, because we might both die in the next hour, and I'll be damned if I go without you knowing. His thumbs brushed her cheeks. And because I love you, I want you to live. That's all. That's the whole of it. Let me hold the wall so you can live. Evelyn put her hands over his hands, held them against her face, and she was crying, and she didn't care. Then you don't get to hold it alone, she said fiercely. If you love me, then you fight to come home to me. You don't fight to die for me. There's a difference, and you keep getting it wrong. We hold that spring house together, all 3 of us, and we make Voss pay for every foot of ground, and we hold till the judge, and we live. We live, Silas. That's the plan. Not you dying so I can be sad about it the rest of my life. You, living. Do you understand me? The hoofbeats were very close now. Kettering wheeled his horse. They're near. We have to move. Decide it now. And Silas Blackwood looked at Evelyn Whitmore in the dark with death riding down on them, and something in him that had wanted to die for 2 years, that had been trying to die since the barn finally at last chose the other thing. Together, he said. God help us. Together. He swung back up onto Bess. The Springhouse Marshall ride. They ran the last half-mile with the hunters closing, and they reached the old stone springhouse as the first riders came over the rise behind them, and they got the wagon jammed against the hillside, and the animals behind the stone and themselves through the low door. The 3 of them, the proof, Kettering and his rifle, and Silas with his pistol, and Evelyn with Samuel's revolver, and they barred the door with the heavy old timber, and took the window, and the murder holes in the ancient walls, and outside in the dark. Harlan Voss and Mercer's guns spread out and surrounded them, and a voice called across the night, that same polite, terrible voice. Blackwood, I know you're in there. Voss's voice smiling. Even now she could hear the smile in it. And the widow with you, the one who sent me to Selina. That was clever, ma'am. I don't forget clever. And the marshal's horse I see out there too, so that's the honest Ambrose Kettering thrown in his lot with an outlaw. My, won't Mr. Mercer be interested to hear that? A pause, and then the smile went out of the voice and left only the cold. Here's how it goes. You send out whatever it is Blackwood's been carrying 2 years. That proof Reed died over. You send it out that window right now, and I'll let the woman ride away. That's a better deal than you'll get at dawn. At dawn, I don't offer deals. At dawn, I burn you out and take it off your bodies. You've got till I count to 10. Inside the spring house in the dark, the 3 of them looked at each other, and Evelyn saw the truth of it in both men's faces, that Voss meant every word, that there was no counting on mercy from a man like that. That whatever they sent out the window, they were all 3 dead the moment Voss had what he wanted, because Voss couldn't leave witnesses, and Voss knew they knew it. He's lying about letting you ride away, Silas said quietly. I know, Evelyn said. The second we hand out that proof, we've got nothing left he wants alive. I know that too. So we don't hand it out. We hold. We make him come and take it, and we make it cost him, and we hold till the judge, or till dawn, or till whatever comes. Silas checked his loads by feel in the dark, and Kettering did the same, and Evelyn's hands were steady now on Samuel's revolver, steadier than they'd ever been. Evelyn, last time I'll ask it. There might still be a way to get you out the back in the dark. Silas Blackwood. She looked at him across the dark stone room. If you say one more word about getting me out, I will shoot you myself and save Voss the trouble. And then softer. Together. You said it. Hold me to it. Outside, Voss's voice began to count. 1, 2. Silas took his place at the window. Kettering took the door. Evelyn took the murder hole in the north wall, the revolver up her heart, slow and cold and certain. 3, 4. When they come, Kettering said low, make every shot tell. We haven't got the powder for anything else. And whatever happens, that bundle does not leave this room in Voss's hands. If it comes to the worst, we burn it before we let him have it. Reed's proof either hangs Mercer or it dies with us. It does not go back to the man it damns. Agreed? Agreed, said Silas. Agreed, said Evelyn. 5, 6, 7. And in the counting silence, with death standing outside in the dark, and the man she loved beside her, and a dead sheriff's proof at her back. Evelyn Whitmore was not afraid, and she understood at last that the town had been wrong about her all along. Every one of them. The clucking women and the grasping men who'd looked at her sighs and her grief and decided she was soft and finished, because there was nothing soft in her. Now nothing finished, only a hard, bright thing, like a blade, and she thought, let them come, and she thumbed back the hammer. 8, 9. I love you too, she said to Silas, quiet in the dark before the 10th count fell. In case this is where it ends, I love you. I stopped being afraid to say it somewhere back on that road. Silas's eyes found hers in the dark, and he almost smiled. Then let's live through this, he said, so I can hear you say it in the daylight. 10, said Harlan Voss, and the dark outside the springhouse erupted in gunfire. The first volley chewed the old stone and screamed off into the dark, and the three of them pressed low behind walls that had stood 100 years. And then Kettering's rifle spoke through the door slot, and a man out in the black cried out and went down, and it had begun. Count your shots, Kettering barked over the roar. Don't fire at muzzle flashes, fire at what's behind them. They want us to waste powder. Silas fired twice through the window, cool and spaced, and Evelyn heard a hoarse scream and a man swear. And she held her own fire at the murder hole, waiting, her whole body shaking with the noise, but her hands steady because Silas had told her on the road, you don't shoot at the dark, you shoot at a man, and she waited for a man. One came, a shape rushing the north wall low and fast, and she waited till he was close enough that she couldn't miss, and she squeezed the trigger, the way she'd squeeze it on a rattlesnake by the woodpile. And the shape dropped, and didn't move, and she'd killed a man, and there was no time to feel it, so she didn't. North wall, she called. One down. Good girl, Silas said, fierce firing again. Reload, slow, don't fumble it, we've got time between rushes. They had time between rushes because Voss was no fool. He wasn't going to throw his men against stone walls in the dark and bleed them dry. After that first hard push, he pulled back, and the guns fell silent and out in the black. His voice came again, easy and cruel. That's some fight in a spring house, Voss called. I'll give you that. But you're 3 guns and I'm a dozen, and I've got all night and all the daylight after it, and you've got what powder you carried. So let's do our arithmetic, shall we? You can't win. You can only choose how long it takes and how much it hurts. A pause. Send out the proof, Blackwood, and I'll make it quick for all of you. That's the only kindness left on the table. He keeps saying send out the proof, Evelyn whispered in the dark. He's careful not to fire on the walls where it might be. He wants it whole. That's our edge, Silas whispered back. He can't burn us out fast, can't blow the walls because he's afraid of destroying the very thing he came for. It makes him slow, it makes him careful. Careful buys us time, and time's the only thing that saves us." He raised his voice. "Come and take it, Voss. You want Reed's proof, you walk in here and pick it up off the floor. I'll be waiting." Voss laughed out in the dark. "Oh, I like you, Blackwood. I truly do. It's a shame." And the guns opened up again. The night wore on that way in rushes and lulls, and they held. They held because the walls were stone and the door was oak, and Voss was too greedy to risk the fire that would have ended it fast. They held because Kettering knew how to fight from cover and made every rifle shot a wound or a warning. They held because Silas, calm and cold at the window, seemed to know where the next rush would come before it came reading the dark, the way he'd taught Evelyn to read it. And they held because Evelyn Whitmore, the soft widow, the finished woman, stood at her murder hole hour after hour, and did not break, did not weep, did not flinch, and put down 2 more of Mercer's men as they came and reloaded with steady hands in the dark, and the men beside her drew strength from her the way she drew it from them. But powder ran low. That was the arithmetic Voss had spoken, and it was true. Somewhere past the middle of the night, Kettering said quietly, "I've got 6 rounds left for the rifle, and what's in the pistol?" "8 for me," said Silas. "5, said Evelyn. "That won't hold another 2 rushes, Kettering said. "He'll figure it. He's counting our fire same as we're counting his. When it slows, he'll know, and he'll come all at once." Silas was silent a moment in the dark. Then we make the last of it count, and we do the thing we swore. The proof doesn't go to Voss. If they breach that door, Evelyn, you burn it. You've got the tinder. You burn Reed's evidence to ash before you let it back into Mercer's hands. And Mercer never knows for certain what was in it, and he spends the rest of his life afraid of a ghost. His voice was steady. That's the last card. If we can't win, we make sure he doesn't either. "I'll burn it," Evelyn said. "I swear it, but it won't come to that." "Evelyn, it won't come to that," she said again hard, "because I don't believe God brought a hunted man to my gate and gave me back my heart just to let Harlan Voss end us all in a stone box. I don't believe it. So we hold and we hold and we wait for the dawn and the judge, and it won't come to burning anything because we are going to live." And as if the words themselves had reached up into heaven, from far out in the dark, from the east, where the black was just beginning to think about turning gray, came a sound that stopped Harlan Voss's next rush cold. Hoofbeats, many of them. A great body of riders coming hard. Everyone froze hunters and hunted alike, and listened, and the hoofbeats grew, and then a voice, unfamiliar, authoritative, boomed across the dark country. "This is a United States Marshal's posse. Lay down your arms." Inside the spring house, Kettering's breath went out of him in a sound that was half a laugh and half a sob. "Prine," he said. "It's Prine. The judge rides with a federal escort, always has 6 deputy marshals sworn to the court, not to any county, not to Mercer. He's early. Sweet God in heaven, he's early." He was up at the door slot shouting into the graying dark. "Prine Aldous, Prine, it's Kettering Ambrose Kettering, Marshal of Abilene, and I've got Sheriff Reed's killers in my sights, and the proof to hang Caleb Mercer. These men outside are Mercer's, take them." Out in the dark, Harlan Voss understood in an instant that his arithmetic had just turned to ash, that he'd surrounded 3 guns in a spring house, and now a dozen federal riders had surrounded him, and Voss did the only thing a man like Voss ever does. He ran. His men scattered with him, breaking for their horses in the gray dark, and the judge's deputies rode them down, and the guns that had been pointed at the spring house all night turned outward into a rout. And Evelyn stood at her murder hole and watched Mercer's empire come apart in the space of 5 minutes, run to ground by 6 federal deputies and an early judge. They caught most of them. They caught Harlan Voss trying to swim a horse across a creek in the dark, and they dragged him out cold and dripping, and put irons on him, and when they brought him past the spring house in the first gray light, Evelyn came out through the low oak door on her own 2 feet, and stood and looked at him, the man who'd smiled at her gate, who'd killed Tom Reed, who'd counted to 10 and set the dark on fire. Voss looked at her dripping and chained, and the smile was gone at last. "You," he said. "Me," said Evelyn Whitmore. "The widow you sent to Selina. Nobody looks twice at me. You should have." and she turned her back on him, which was the worst thing she could have done to a man like that, and walked away and did not look back. And behind her, she heard him start to curse, and heard a deputy shut him up. And she never spoke to Harlan Voss again, as long as she lived. The judge was a spare, gray, unsmiling man with eyes that missed nothing, and he set up his court in the Abilene Town Hall that very day, because Aldous Prine had ridden the territory long enough to know that justice delayed in a place like this was justice a rich man could still buy, and he meant to give Caleb Mercer no time to buy anything. Kettering laid it all before him. Silas laid it before him. And Evelyn laid the oilcloth bundle on the judge's table with her own hands. 2 years of Sheriff Tom Reed's careful patient. Deadly work the deeds, and the letters, and the ledger in the cramped, honest hand. And Prine went through it, page by page, in a silence so complete, you could hear the clock, and when he was done, he took off his spectacles and looked at the three of them for a long moment. In 20 years on the circuit, he said, I have rarely seen a case build itself so completely. Sheriff Reed was a meticulous man. He looked at Silas. You are Silas Blackwood. I am your honor. You are wanted for his murder. I am your honor, and I didn't do it. I was there when he died. I held him. He put that bundle in my hands and told me to bring it to a marshal named Kettering, and it's taken me 2 years and this woman here to do it. Silas stood straight, and he did not look away from the judge, and Evelyn's heart ached with how far he'd come from the man who'd tried to hand himself to a jail cell to die. But I'll not stand here and let you think I'm innocent of everything, Your Honor. I rode with bad men before Reed turned me. I frightened folks off their land for Mercer. I never killed a soul, but I was there while wrong was done, and I let it happen, and that's a thing I have to answer for, and I'm ready to answer for it. I only ask that you weigh it against the 2 years I've spent trying to bring the man who really did the killing to your table. The courtroom was silent, and Judge Aldous Prine, who had heard 10,000 men swear their innocence, looked at the one man who'd stood in his court and confessed his guilt unasked. And something moved in his hard gray face. I have Sheriff Reed's own words here, Prine said, lifting a letter from the bundle written 2 weeks before his death, naming Silas Blackwood as a man he had turned to the side of the law, a witness he meant to protect a man he believed could be redeemed. He set it down. It seems the dead sheriff and I are of one mind about you, Mr. Blackwood. As to your past crimes, your honesty about them weighs in your favor, as does 2 years of a hunted life spent guarding the very evidence that convicts the man you served. I am inclined to see you cleared of the murder entirely, and shown considerable mercy on the rest contingent on your full testimony against Caleb Mercer. His eyes were level. Will you give it? Every word of it, Silas said. Gladly. Then you will not hang Mr. Blackwood. Not today, not for Tom Reed, not for any of it. You'll testify and you'll answer for your part honestly, and if the rest of your life looks anything like the last 2 years of it, I expect you'll have paid your debt and then some. Prine almost smiled. Sheriff Reed saw something in you worth saving. It appears he was a good judge of men to the last. They arrested Caleb Mercer that afternoon. 6 federal deputies rode out to his great ranch with a warrant signed by a circuit judge who could not be bought, and they found the silver-haired man taking his coffee on his own veranda, and when they told him he was under arrest for the murder of Sheriff Thomas Reed for land theft and bribery, and a dozen other crimes proven in Reed's own careful hand, Caleb Mercer set down his cup and looked at them with the disbelief of a man who had never once in his life faced a consequence, and asked them if they knew who he was. They did. That was rather the point. They brought him in, and he stood before Judge Prine, and for the first time the polite mask cracked, and the thing underneath showed through, and it was small and frightened and ordinary, the way such men always are underneath, and Evelyn watched from the gallery and felt no triumph. Only a deep and settling quiet, because the man who had sent smiling agents to a fresh widow's gate to take her water was going to answer for all of it at last. The trial took a week. Silas testified for 2 days of it, and it cost him dragging the whole dark history of his outlaw years out into the daylight in front of a crowded courtroom. But he did it plain, and he did it complete, and he spared himself nothing. And Evelyn sat in the front row of that gallery every hour of every day, and every time it got hard. Every time his voice faltered under the weight of what he was confessing. He found her face in the crowd and steadied on it and went on. Caleb Mercer was convicted on every count. The families he'd ruined came forward one after another, more of them than anyone had known. Widows and old men and children grown, who'd lost their father's land, and they told their stories to the honest judge, and Reed's ledger backed every word. And when it was done, Aldous Prine handed down a sentence that took everything from Caleb Mercer that Mercer had ever taken from anyone. His empire broken up and returned where it could be returned, his years to be spent in a federal prison, far from any county he'd ever owned, and the courtroom, when the gavel fell, was silent. And then it was not silent, and the sound the ruined families made was not cheering exactly, but something older and deeper than cheering. The sound of people who had been made small, getting at long last made whole. Harlan Voss hanged. There was proof enough and witnesses enough, and Voss had killed too many to slip any noose, and Silas did not go to watch it, and Evelyn didn't ask him to. And then quite suddenly, it was over. The trial ended. The judge rode on to the next town on his circuit. The federal deputies dispersed, and the great terror that had hung over that county for years simply lifted the way a fever breaks, and the country went on being the country. And Silas Blackwood, cleared of murder, shown mercy on the rest, a free man. For the first time in 2 years, stood in the dusty street outside the Abilene Town Hall, and did not know what to do with himself. Evelyn found him there. She'd known she would. "It's strange," he said when she came up beside him. 2 years I ran toward this, getting the proof to a judge, clearing my name, Reed's justice, and now it's done and I find I don't know how to stand still. I've forgotten how to be a man who isn't running from something." He looked at her, and there was fear in it, a different fear than the guns had put in him. "I told you once in the dark that I'd forgotten how to want to live. That clearing my name wasn't the same as having a life. You told me I'd have to figure out how to want to live again." A pause. "I don't know how, Evelyn. I've got no home. No trade but the wrong one. Nothing to my name but a horse, and a past folks will whisper about the rest of my days. I don't know what a man like me does now." And Evelyn Whitmore, who had buried a husband and sealed off her heart, and sworn no man would ever cross her gate again, looked at the hunted man who wasn't hunted anymore, and understood that this was the moment the whole road had been leading to, more than the proof, more than the judge, more than any of it. "I know a place," she said. "Kansas. A ranch, good water, good grass, a house that stood empty too long, and a barn where a man once asked to sleep for just one night." Her voice was steady, sure. "It needs a partner. The widow who runs it has held it alone 14 months and proved she can prove it to the whole county and to herself. But she's decided she doesn't want to hold it alone anymore. Not because she can't, because she'd rather not." She took his hand there in the dusty street in the daylight in front of God and Abilene and anyone who cared to look. "You told me you loved me in the dark when you thought we were going to die. I want to hear you say it in the daylight when we're going to live. And then I want you to come home, Silas. Not as a wounded stranger asking for shelter, as a man asking for a home. Because I've got one, and it's got room, and I have been so tired for so long of the silence in it." Silas Blackwood looked at her, and something came into his face that Evelyn had never seen there in all the miles they'd traveled. Not relief, not gratitude, but a plain and shining joy. The joy of a man who had spent 2 years believing his life was over, discovering that it had in fact only just begun. "I love you, Evelyn Whitmore," he said in the daylight, clear for anyone to hear. "In the dark, and in the daylight, and every hour between. I'll come home. God, I'll come home. I'll mend your fences and work your grass, and I'll spend the rest of my days trying to be worth the woman who pulled a shotgun down an inch because I stopped my horse from drinking too fast." His voice broke, and he didn't try to hide it. "I don't deserve it. A man like me, a home like that, a woman like you. You saved my life in a wagon on a dark road," she said. "You held a stone wall all night so I could live. You confessed every sin you ever committed in front of a crowded courtroom, rather than let anyone believe you were better than you are. She reached up and put her hand against his face the way she had in the dark. Deserving isn't the point, Silas. It never was. The point is, you pulled your horse off the water. The point is who you are when you think nobody's counting it. I saw who you were that first night at the gate, and I've never once been wrong about it, and I'm not wrong now. Come home. They went home. They were married that autumn in the little white church east of Abilene, the same church with the loose stone in the north corner where Tom Reed's proof had waited 2 years in the dark. Evelyn chose it on purpose, and Silas understood why, and neither of them had to say it out loud. Ambrose Kettering stood up for Silas because in the months since the spring house, the marshal and the outlaw had become something like brothers, 2 men bound forever by a night they'd survived, and a friend they'd both loved and avenged. Judge Prine, passing back through on his circuit, heard of it, and delayed his going a day to attend, and remarked to Kettering afterward that in 20 years he'd married few couples he'd bet on more surely to last. They went back to this ranch to the good water and the good grass, and the house that had stood empty too long, and it was empty no more. Silas mended the fences he'd promised to mend. He worked the grass and tended the cattle, and named a new foal after Tom Reed and Bess. The old gray roan lived out her days, fat and honored in the best pasture, because Evelyn never forgot that it was the sight of a dying man pulling his horse off the water that had saved both their lives, and she made sure that horse wanted for nothing to the end of her days. The town talked at first. Of course the town talked. The clucking women who'd written Evelyn off as too soft and too heavy and too finished did not know what to make of it. When the widow they'd pitied came back from Abilene, not only holding her ranch, but at the very center of the story that had brought down Caleb Mercer, the woman who'd carried the proof, who'd faced down Harlan Voss twice, who'd held a stone wall through a night of gunfire, and they did not know what to make of the quiet, steady man beside her. An outlaw pardoned, who tipped his hat to every soul in town and worked harder than any 2 hired hands and loved his wife so plainly that even the meanest gossip ran out of things to say about it. They ran out of things to say in the end. That's what happened to the Whispers. The country is a hard place and a fair one, and it takes the measure of a person. Eventually, no matter what they looked like on the day they arrived, and the country took the measure of Evelyn Whitmore and Silas Blackwood over the seasons and the years, and found them at last to be exactly what they were. 2 people who had been counted out by everyone, including themselves, and who had refused to stay counted out. And the families Mercer had ruined, the ones who got their land back, the ones who'd stood up in Prine's courtroom and been made whole, they did not forget who'd carried the proof that freed them. There was many a table in that county that always had a place at it for the Blackwoods. Many a door that opened wide when they came calling. And if Evelyn had once believed that her size and her grief made her invisible, made her less, made her a thing to be pitied and passed over, she came to understand over those years that she had never once been invisible to the people who mattered, and that the very thing the town had scorned in her softness, her kindness, the warmth that had made her take in a dying stranger against all sense, was the thing that had saved not only 2 lives, but a whole county's worth of them. On a summer evening, years later, an evening much like the one when a wounded stranger had first ridden toward her gate, Evelyn sat on her porch and watched the sun go down over the prairie, and Silas came up from the barn and sat beside her, older now gray, coming in at his temples, his hands worn honest with a decade of good work, and he took her hand the way he always did, and they watched the light go gold and long together. "You ever think about it," he said. "That first night, you had that shotgun on me. You could have sent me on. Any sensible woman would have." "Every day," she said. "I think about it every day, and every day I thank God I was never quite as sensible as the town believed." He smiled and lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her worn knuckles. "I suppose I still owe you," he said, "for letting me sleep here that night." And Evelyn Whitmore, who had once been the loneliest woman on the Kansas frontier, who had been called too soft and too broken and too finished to survive, who had proven every last one of them wrong, looked out over the land she had held and the life she had built, and the man she had saved and been saved by. And she smiled and gave him the only answer there had ever been. "No," she said. You paid your debt the day you faced the truth. You don't owe me a thing, Silas Blackwood. You never did. You came to my gate asking for a place to rest, and it turned out you were the rest I'd been needing all along. The sun went down over the prairie. The house that had been silent as a grave was full of a life neither of them had believed they'd ever have again. And out in the good pasture, the old gray horse lifted her head against the last of the light, and somewhere a whole county slept safe that once had not. And two people who had lost everything and found it again in each other sat on their porch in the gold evening and were at last and for all the rest of their days home. That is the whole of it. A wounded gunman asked to sleep in a lonely widow's barn, and she found the truth of him, and he found the truth of her. And together they found something the frontier rarely gave to anyone a second chance, seized with both hands, and held on to for the rest of a long and happy life. Nobody is only their worst mistake. Nobody is finished until they decide they are. And sometimes the greatest rescue of all arrives at your gate at sunset wounded and asking for nothing, and changes everything.